What's going on, everybody? Excited to have you guys on stream, especially given how tough it was to watch that Chicago Bears versus Indianapolis Colts game. And so I'm excited that you're here to break it down with me because, frankly, while it was a tough one to chew through, there's a lot that we can learn about this game as we pour over the tape. Now, I'm going to start out with a lot to say. I've got a ton of stuff written down here about this game, and then I'll cut that first couple of minutes, say about 15, 20, into its own video for those that don't want to watch the whole stream, and we'll do a whole lot of Q&A after that. If that sounds good, great. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive into things. So, of course, the most complicated thing about this game is where to lay the blame. We're going to be talking a lot about offense to start out because I'll tell you right now that while I'm sure we'll get into defense with the Q&A, the overall talking point about the defense is that they played really well and maybe they just didn't quote-unquote dominate enough, which, you know what? That's fine. I'm not trying to suggest that the defense has to dominate all the time. They held a good, decent offense at the minimum to 19 points. That's as good as you could ask for, not to mention they looked good in the process. But of course, and you guys know what I'm already thinking, the real deal here isn't the fact that the Bears offense or the Bears defense allowed 19 points. It's the fact that the Bears offense only had 3 points until a late garbage time touchdown, if you will, against prevent defense. Look, I love the fact that the Bears were able to score a touchdown, and that Nick Foles throw to Allen Robinson, that was a very solid throw. But I'd be lying to you guys if I said that that's a countable touchdown in the world of quote-unquote real offense, because while the points are recorded in the record books for history to remember forever, it came at the late part of a game, and I can tell you right now, the Colts were basically just playing very basic cover 2, and it was as easy to score as you could ask for in the NFL. But the trouble is that the Bears had made this change, right? So they'd swapped from Mitch Trubisky to Nick Foles. And in so doing, they stepped up from playing some of the worst defenses in the NFL. In fact, one of the worst per DVOA against the Falcons. I think they're 31st to the bar none best in the NFL against the Colts. And the Colts certainly played like it, and there's a lot of reasons that this offense fell apart, but I'm not surprised that it sent Bears Twitter and Bears Nation into a bit of a tumultuous week, because not only are we getting, if you will, the greatest quarterback of all time in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Tom Brady, tomorrow night, but we lost and our offense looked absolutely pitiful in doing so. But enough prelude. Let's get into the film, because here's the deal. What I'm going to show you is that there were 5 things that killed the Bears, right? Nick Foles had some issues that killed the Bears. The offensive line had some serious issues that killed the Bears. The play calling was a problem. Chemistry was a major issue. And then a whole lot of fixable mistakes. You know what? It may only be 4 things that really killed the Bears, those first 4. But I want to go through them because I actually will tell you outright, just from the start, I don't think Nick Foles had a particularly bad game, but he did make some key mistakes down the line, which is a huge bummer because you would hope that he might be able to lead the team. Anyways, let's get into it. The first thing that I want to talk about is the way that the Bears started the game. And I think that we can do that by looking here at this game pass notation, right? So they start with a run, they move to a pass, they move to another run, and then they keep kind of going back and forth between passing and running. But here's the key, right? When the Bears did try to run, because they opened the game with one of their basic, like the plays that they have been doing so successfully over these last bunch of weeks. And thank you, Jordan. That's really kind of you to say. But so the Bears started out with an outside zone run, and you guys have seen a lot of this. We've been watching the Bears do outside zone running for the last 3 weeks, and not only have we watched them do it, we've watched them do it successfully. But against this Colts team, what you're about to see, I'm sure, is that these 3 defensive linemen, Danico Autry, Buckner. Oh, gracious. I can't remember Buckner's first name. And then this guy right here, Grover Stewart, who's sort of a no-name until today. They tore up this Bears offensive line just about every time they tried to do anything. Right here, we're going to see this right outside zone run. Cody Whitehair gets pushed back a good bit. Jermaine Ifedi and Bobby Massey can't establish anything in particular. And what you missed is that Jimmy Graham over here doesn't get a particularly good, thank you, Jordan, DeForest Buckner. He doesn't get a particularly good cut block there on the linebacker, number 50, and the Bears get 2 yards out of it. Now, this is better than it was for almost an entire year there in 2019, where at least the Bears are able to get 2 yards out of a bad edge block and nothing particularly doing there in this right outside zone. But this has been the Bears' bread and butter. It hasn't been their passing game. It's been their running game that's really set everything up and and the Bears have been able to do a whole lot of play action off of that. I have no issue, by the way, with letting this next play roll, because you're going to see Darnell Mooney motion in, run a nice fake go route and catch it for a first down, because I think it's important you see both of these plays. You saw an outside zone run that didn't really get anything, and you saw a quick pass that got the first down. That quickly, yeah, I know, Jeremy. I know it says Atlanta. I'll have to fix that for next week. I didn't realize that the thumbnail that I thought I could put at the end would actually apply to the existing settings and the existing game. But yeah, we'll get that fixed up for next week. This is all a work in process. Anyways, thank you guys for bearing with me. Wink. The trouble is that every time the Bears went back to the ground game, it was more of the same. I could and will talk about plenty of other issues that happened throughout the game, but one of the biggest ones that I saw was that they couldn't generate any motion on the ground, and it really had nothing to do with it had nothing to do with the quarterback, but it had a lot to do with the offensive line and the fact that Cordarrelle Patterson, I have to mention this or else I'll forget to, doesn't really have fabulous vision as an offensive runner. This is a great example because it's probably the best blocked play. And don't worry about it at all, Jeremy. Thank you for pointing it out. This is probably the best block play of the Bears' day, outside of a 3rd and 1 that they get later. But right here, as I'm sure you guys can tell, the Bears have got a nice wall set going right here. Jermaine Ifedi is about to pick this guy up. I believe this is, I can't remember, 54, solid player, but yes, it's deadly. You're about to point out exactly what I'm going to say. So Cordarrelle Patterson, he doesn't see that there is actually a pretty decent running lane up this direction, and instead he follows Cole Kmet directly into another block, and the Bears get 4 yards out of a lot of bodies bumping together when honestly they had about the best lane that they could get. This in particular suddenly had me start thinking, oh gosh, I know I've been talking about how Patterson's improving, but this is some troublesome vision, and unfortunately we're going to see another good example of what happened here. But so from there, the Bears kept trying to get the run game going to try to sort of feel out what the Colts were going to do. They start then with this next run, which only gets another 3 yards, and that's actually fine because, oh no, there's another one in the middle. So it is right. I've got them all marked down. Yes. So I skipped one, but right after that first down, they try to go straight back to this outside zone again. They're going to go outside zone to the left this time. And you'll see it here on the wide angle, and we'll show it again from behind center. The Bears just can't really get anything out of their blocking from outside zone. In particular, and remember, this has been the bread and butter of the Bears' entire offense this year. Cody Whitehair can't hold his block, and you're unfortunately going to hear that a lot. And DeForest Buckner obliterates Jermaine Ifedi, and they make the play. Let me wind that back for you guys so you can see it again, because I think it's really key that we notice this. The interior offensive line. The interior offensive line has been the moneymaker and the bread maker for the Bears this season. So, yeah, Whitehair is one of our best offensive linemen, and he had just a terrible day. He gets controlled pretty quickly off the snap. And remember, the Bears are trying to run upfield instead of outfield. I'll show you later in this show. We'll actually have to go back to 2017 to find some examples of Jordan Howard running outside zone. But there are a lot of, you know what? This is as good a time to talk about it as any. The Bears' specific brand of outside zone is a strange one. The Bears so it's all about handoff point. What you see with a lot of outside zones, and I want to see if I can freeze frame it there, is that a lot of them are actually going to give that ball to the running back, where the running back, instead of moving this way, is moving flatter along the line as he picks his hole. In this case, the Bears like giving the option to run behind the inside guys. They know that the strength of their line is James Daniels right here, Cody Whitehair, and Germain Ifedi. The trouble is that that's where the Colts are at their strongest, as sure, Grover Stewart, but the real name obviously is DeForest Buckner, and he ate the Bears alive. So remember, this is the second running play, and already you got two guys directly in the lane. Ifedi's on the ground because he got shed by DeForest Buckner. Almost said shredded, though unfortunately that's kind of the case. And the Bears don't get anything from it. So that's 2 runs and 4 yards, and they don't look very good because, I mean, there's not a lot of push here that the Bears are able to get. Now, before I move on to show you the next set of runs, you have to remember something. I love Matt Nagy's West Coast system, especially when he does it well. The cut blocking, actually, Jeremy, is incredibly common, by the way. In case anybody's curious, you're going to see a lot of cut blocking in outside zone, especially when I wouldn't be surprised if Bobby Massey is going to try to cut block here. Okay, they don't do it in this play, but in plenty of cases, let me go ahead and get my do not disturb going, just to be sure I don't get any work notifications or something like that. But so anyways, one of the biggest, outside zone commonly involves a cut block on the end of the line. So usually if they're moving this way over to the left, this guy's going to cut block somebody. But anyways, getting back to the point. As much as I like Matt Nagy and his West Coast system, especially when he does it well, he does have a tendency to give up on the run when it's not getting anything. He sees a pass incompletion as part of the passing process. He seems to see a poor run as repeatable, and as I'm sure you guys have seen, when he gets, even as few as 2 poor runs, he tends to move off of it and frankly try to recreate the wheel. In this case, I actually thought he did a decent job holding to what the Bears want to do, but he came up with a different system, or at least employed one that I want to explain, because it's not the same as inside zone, but it looks a little like it. So the third Bears running play, which is wild to say, like almost all the way through the first quarter, but they're going to run a running scheme called duo. And I think this is important because you're going to notice something almost immediately. Duo is football term for double team. And the Bears are going to basically try to get as many double teams as they can. So if you go ahead and track with me, Bobby Massey's about to be the only guy on his own because Ifedi and Whitehair are going to double team this guy. James Daniels and Leno are going to double team this guy. The tight ends, they're going to sweep in and double team this guy. That's how duo works. So the whole point here with running duo is trying to make sure that the Bears can see if they can get any motion at all through the use of a ton of double teams. And here on 2nd and 4, they get decent motion, but let's be honest, if we go back and watch that play again, especially given that they're getting that they are specifically all on double teams, you would almost expect a little more motion from these front group instead of everybody collapsing directly into the running lane and the running back having to bounce out where the tight ends were scrapping. Hey, thank you, Michael. That was really kind of you. That's my brother. I love him. But so anyways, so the big key here and the reason that I want to talk about duo is because the Bears are basically trying to use whatever they can. Duo is consistently, by the way, used in the short yardage packages. That's generally where they want to, or that's generally where it gets used, because as I'm sure you could guess, it doesn't really let people get up the field as far as blocking. But the Bears even started using this duo set on first down, and I think this play is perfect because if you already have seen it, the Bears were not able to get much push even on these double teams. So right here, again, let's set up the duo package. We've got Massey out here on his own. These two are double blocking 90. These two are double blocking Buckner, and these tight ends are double blocking the down linebacker, number 50. So then, as they go forward, here come the blocks. Nobody's moving. David Montgomery just sort of puts the ball up the middle of the field, and the Bears get, I believe, 2 yards. So I'll show it again in the background while I talk about this, but the Bears' offensive line on the ground just couldn't get any movement. This Colts defensive line was dominating them, and it became a known, not just to Nagy, but to the Colts. And what that meant was that they played a whole lot of cover 2 and cover 3, and we can walk through those in a little bit. Now, it doesn't help anything that when it comes to our blocking, I have to include our screen game, unfortunately, or the lack thereof. So, Jack, I'm glad you asked. The main reason that you're calling these double blocks is because you don't believe in your offensive line to actually generate enough movement. I'll frankly go back to the play we were just on because I really think it's the best example you're going to find. The Bears don't think that they can run basic outside zone because outside zone does involve some single blocks, and they need to be hit, or else you're going to lose yardage quickly. In this case, the Bears are trying to use the most sure thing they can get, double blocks, to create some motion. And as you can see, 90 and Buckner aren't going to move. These guys don't take a single step back throughout the course of this play. It's not good, and it's one that I don't know if the Bears are just able to fix it outside of hoping that they don't run into the Colts again, who just dominated them on the day. I mean, this isn't a specific... This really isn't a schematic issue. It's not that it's not that they ran duo that's problematic. It's the fact that they couldn't get any motion with these linemen in the run game, because if you can't hit your blocks, you can't get any yards. And speaking of not being able to hit your blocks and getting yards, let's go back to the screen comment because I have to talk about this. So remember, generally, if the run game isn't working, what's a West Coast coach going to do? They're probably going to call various screen packages, which the Bears might have called a couple more if their screens didn't look so bad. I mean, let me go ahead and back this up for you so you can take a look at it. But basically, the Bears are going to run a play action screen. And I want you to take a look because I'm actually not 100% certain, by the way, if Foles actually made a read. He pretty quickly moves over to Patterson. But right here, I want you to just make sure you're watching the lineman because Daniel's going to come out to block this guy. I think that's Whitehair going to try to block here. And Ifeadi's going to try to hang on to number 10 or to number 90, but all he's really got to do is slow him down. So the trouble, of course, is that when Foles kicks it out to Patterson, Daniels can't hit a block. And this is a huge bummer. Daniels tends not to be able to block in space, but he's not the only one that has issues. Whitehair misses 2, Ifeadi loses control of his guy, and Patterson has literally nowhere to go. The trouble is, guys, that in a West Coast system that wants to replace a lot of runs with passes, technically, like get the ball out on the edge kind of thing, you need blocking to be better than this. And this is another spot where I'm not one to criticize coaching often. If I can avoid it, I will, because player execution is one of the only things you can really verifiably grade when you're watching film most of the time. But these screens have been awful for 3 years now. In 2018, they weren't very good. In 2019, they got even worse. And here, there's only 2 times where the Bears actually attempt a screen, and they are both terrible. I mean, let me go ahead and find the next one. It is right here in the second quarter, and I want you to take a look at what happens here on this left kick-out screen to Anthony Miller. And I agree with you, Ovechkin. All this stuff would be way better with movement at the snap, but there's an amazing amount of confusion here in this Bears offense. Just go ahead and watch Ted Ginn hold this key block, and by hold it, I mean not. He gets hit immediately. First block. It's right there. He can't hold it almost at all, as Miller finally has some movement at the snap, and there's just nowhere for him to go. So that's two screens that both lost they didn't lose yardage. They just gained a net 0 yards between the two of them. I mean, it's just bad. And the trouble is that of course we now have established that the Bears couldn't really run the ball. They were even double teaming guys, and they couldn't get any movement at the line of scrimmage. And they can't really throw the ball out to the sidelines to try to create runs through these screen plays. Neither are really working. So what do? Well, they tend to just throw it. And this is kind of what the Colts want, by the way. This is very similar. You probably remember this. Maybe you put 2 and 2 together. This is a very similar defense to what Vic Fangio did back in 2018. It's not the same, but it's similar. Now, Jack, I will get to that in a second. That's a good question. But so... Wims, Ovechkin, I just imagine it's because Ginn had made the roster. Truth be told, I couldn't tell you. But so with all of this, I saw the Bears then immediately move to a whole lot of throwing, and we could get into that. We probably will in a more dedicated Foles section moment thing. But what I really want to make clear here is that if there's one reason that I think the Bears offense started to struggle, it's because as they got into the deeper parts of the offense, the parts where you actually had to run some passing plays, the Bears started to struggle with communication and execution. Let's start with this play, because I think it's one of the best examples, and then there's a very famous and obvious one that I'll show you at the end. So this is a Seattle concept. I want to show you the play before I want to break down the play before you see it. What Seattle means, that's a terrible drawing. What Seattle means is that this guy is going to run a deep post. I think it's Miller. This guy, I think it's Mooney, is going to run also a deep post with the idea that they both push these two safeties out of the play as Allen Robinson steps forward and cuts back across. That's called Seattle in this case. Now, it's a play action variation of Seattle. So that means that Foles right here is going to throw a play action fake, and he's going to hit A-Rob, who is thankfully coming open if you're watching downfield. The trouble is, and you've probably already seen it, Foles had to get rid of the ball. And why did he have to get rid of the ball? They had to get rid of it because this rusher right here is bearing down on him immediately, and he's totally unblocked. So what happened? Why in the world would you call Seattle with no option? Well, this is where things get a little more complicated. So do you see Demetrius Harris here on the end? He's going to pretty much block nobody, and that's because I'm almost certain, based on other plays the Bears have run, Harris is supposed to cut back across the line and make that block like this. And then he would block over there. It's going to be easier to see from back here behind center, but basically Harris is going to move across all the way like that, and then his assignment would suggest he's supposed to come back across and block this guy right here. He doesn't do it. So Foles sits there, he gets rid of the ball, and almost immediately Demetrius Harris, if you watch him, and hopefully we'll be able to see it in slow motion, starts signaling, that one's on me, I did that wrong. And that only confirmed from the guy who I was talking to that originally showed me this, that he'd missed his blocking assignment and that the Bears missed a play downfield because of it. Because remember, if you watch this play, you're going to see both safeties get pulled by Miller and Mooney, and Allen Robinson gets his opportunity right there. Maybe he wouldn't have, because this cornerback might have been watching the ball, which by now is very, very much dead. But I tend to think he would have gotten open, and it's all because of a missed blocking assignment. Now, unfortunately, that wasn't the only miscommunication on the Bears' day. They had a really famous one right here where originally it looked like David Montgomery had made a mistake, but in fact, based on post-game press conferences, it sounds like Nick Foles that got the play switched. Got the play switched in his head. You guys have seen this one, I'm sure. Nick Foles kills right there. He takes the snap, he goes to handoff, nobody's there, and he charges forward for a couple of yards. Based on what I heard in the post-game press conference, it sounds like everybody walked into this huddle knowing that the Bears had a pass that they could, or had a run play that they could kill to a pass, and then Foles got it mixed up in his head, thought that they had a pass they could kill to a run. He liked the draw play, so he kills to that run. Everybody else is thinking pass, and not Foles. So he runs out, and he ends up right there. Not good. You saw a ton of this throughout the game. Different execution issues as well as miscommunications that led to poor plays that didn't have to be poor plays. Because if you watch this from this all-22 angle, I actually think there's a pretty good lane for the draw. I have no idea what the passing lane would be, but it's a 2nd and 5. So as far as handing the ball off to the running back, he would have, 5 yards of space to take on this guy right here, potentially initiate contact and fall forward for another, let's say 3 yards, maybe 4. But then it's 3rd and 1 in the end zone, and you don't end up with the next play we'll break down, which is the Demetrius Harris throw that maybe you remember, probably you do. This next play to Demetrius Harris is another example of miscommunication, but it's the more complex kind. It's quarterbacks miscommunicating with their receivers. So here on this throw in particular, Foles takes the snap and he looks over here, and let's take a look at the defense that he's throwing at. So this corner is frozen. He's watching Nick Foles. This corner is following the receiver, and this undercutting linebacker is sitting still. So Foles identifies that Demetrius Harris is open, but where's he going to put the ball? Foles thinks, well, okay, I need to put it on his outside shoulder, while Harris runs right into where he ought to be, or at least where the play tells him to be. So Foles ends up throwing the ball a good 2 feet behind him, when maybe had Harris just cut in and sat down like that, just sort of stopped. And you see this plenty of times with all sorts of receivers when quarterbacks and receivers are on the same page. He would have been able to catch the ball as Foles threw it without any issue. This to me looks like a guy who's making his first start in a brand new offense for him. Well, not offensive system, but a brand new set of players that needs time to sink in. Obviously, these kinds of accuracy mistakes can't happen going forward, and I would never suggest that they're somehow okay. I would tell you that they're fixable, because this looks to me like it's just a miscommunication rather than a misfire. And thankfully, as far as going forward, even against these Colts, Foles' pocket is really not so bad. So he's able to make this throw at least as he intends to and get the ball out there to Harris. It's too bad he misses, and unfortunately, those are the only Bears points of the day. So I could keep going about miscommunication and the other issues that the Bears saw. They also saw some issues from Nick Foles. He had a couple of misfires that were purely physical. I'll go over one of the, I'll call it the more famous ones, because I thought that this was probably his worst physical play of the day, where you're going to see Foles roll out to his right and look downfield, find Darnell Mooney, find him open, and just push the ball too far. So here's the play. He rolls out, he throws, and the catch is way too far over the sidelines, and there's no way for it. I'll tell you what happened and why it happened. So the Bears are rolling Foles out because they know that, as you can see, the Colts interior line is coming after them. But downfield, Darnell Mooney is still pretty tight with his corner trailing behind him, and this guy's fading out into space, so you really don't need to worry about him. But what Foles sees is that these two are pretty tight together. So as Foles releases the ball, this is key to me, the ball is in the air. He's already made the decision. He's already thrown it. At this point, the Colts defender starts to come down, and this means that Mooney ends up in a ton more space than I think even Foles would have expected. He probably thought that the corner was still going to be on his back, so he pushed the ball over to the sidelines instead of lofting it into easy space, and Mooney doesn't get it. Here's the problem, though. Even if it's a sideline throw, it's still a major miss. The ball is so far, or the ball is so high, even if it's just right around over the sidelines, that Mooney can't reasonably make a good grab on it, even as he made the acrobatic catch earlier. And honestly, Joachim, if it is the orange uniforms, don't color me surprised. We were very poor in them in Miami 2 years ago, and I can't remember what we did with them in 2019, but that was a bad enough season. So from here, Foles lays this ball out, and to me, it's just too far over. It's not a good throw. If you ask almost anybody, they'll tell you it's not a good throw. Foles would probably tell you it's not a good throw, and that's part of why he reiterated that he's got to execute better. He's got to execute better. That's where I think he struggled the most. But you know what? I've now just spent, 25 minutes talking about some of the problems of this offense. And, oh, hey, Oren, thank you for pointing that out, because I think this is really key. So another thing that I've seen with quarterbacks, and I even would defend Mitch Trubisky on any of these, is that a lot of people make the quarterback's reads for them based on who is open. So as you can probably see, Demetrius Harris is sitting right here, totally open. The trouble is that Mooney's never not open either, and quarterbacks tend to read players one by one. They determine their person. Foles, for instance, he'll read the defense and he'll find his option, but they still go through options the same way we do. They check option 1, they check option 2, they check option 3. Nothing's wrong about this decision to throw to Mooney, even if there is quote-unquote an easier option underneath, purely because the Mooney decision isn't wrong. Mooney's open, and he gets open, and he would be open downfield. There's nothing wrong with making the aggressive decision if you can hit the mark. Now, that's why I'm criticizing Foles for a poor throw. It's because if you can't hit the mark, the decision is useless. It's still an incomplete pass. And of course, it's easy to look in the hindsight mirror and basically say, I think Foles should hit Demetrius Harris. Look at how open he is. Even if it's a crossbody throw, you could take a step up and find this guy. I mean, you got plenty of room. But the decision is fine, in my opinion. I would say that if it was Mitch, I'll say it if it's Foles. If he's open, he's open. And in Mooney's case, he is. The throw's just not there. But let's move on. The neat thing, if there is a neat thing, about this Colts game is that there were a lot of things the Bears did well that they actually didn't really do before. I could make a joke about the offsides that they drew, but frankly, Trubisky actually did do a pretty good job with a lot of those drawing hard counts. The one that I really want to go back to is this deep Mooney throw and a couple of other plays by Nick Foles, because while I'd love to point out some great running plays, we didn't really have any. We missed Tariq Cohen in that capacity, believe it or not. I think so anyways, because he's a great field stretcher. This play is a great example of one of the things I think the Bears were missing and something that they might be able to build on. Here I'll show you, it's the Mooney catch. So what the Bears are going to get is that they line up in this heavy set that they like to use a lot, the I formation, which you can make a Nagy joke here about how he wasn't brought here to run the I formation. But Nick Foles is going to see, for one of the few times all game, actual single high coverage, or at least he thinks he may get it. And if it stays there, he wants to take this deep shot to Mooney to open up a drive. So from here, let's take a look at what he sees. So Nick Foles from there is then going to, let's go under center. He's going to spot the safety. He's going to hold him with his eyes, and he's going to let this ball fly. So he takes the snap, bang. He watches the safety all the way to the last second where he plants his feet and he lets that ball go. And there's certainly some pressure coming. He certainly takes a bit of a hit as he falls away into it, but that's not really something I want to focus on. The key here is that the mental aspect of this quarterbacking play is pretty much exactly what you want to see. He holds this safety. Let's now keep an eye here. He holds him for as long as he can before letting that ball go down the sidelines. I think Mitch would have attempted it, Jordan. I just don't know if he would have hit it. And he puts the ball far enough down the sidelines where really only Mooney has a shot at it. If you take a look at the placement, Mooney jumps up, and if he doesn't catch that ball, which is pretty high up if we take a look at it right here, it's, what do you think, there-ish? If he doesn't catch this, it's going to sail out into the sidelines. This safety doesn't have a play in it. The defender doesn't have a play in it. It's pretty much just Mooney and the ball. And he makes a really wonderful catch and picks up 33 yards for the Bears really, really quickly. This is an awesome play. I'm not about to sit here and tell you, this is incredible quarterbacking. It's actually fairly basic. But the throw's nice, and the receiver makes a play on it, and that's something that Foles is able to bring to the table, is just a basic attempt at letting your playmaker go make a play. And gracious, guys, is that not just a fabulous, fabulous catch right there? I mean, Darnell Mooney has been so impressive. From there, another one that I want to walk through because I think this is a really, really cool play, and it's something that it's another thing that Foles did well because, believe it or not, even in a game like this, yes, there were some things that Foles did do really well. He was able to make a couple of really nice reads on that last drive that ended up being not the one right before the game ended, the one or a couple of them in the third quarter. He makes a really, really wonderful first down conversion here to Anthony Miller that honestly I have no idea. I don't want to bring up the other quarterback. Let's leave that at the door. This is really wonderful quarterbacking, and it's the kind of thing we haven't seen in Chicago in a little bit. So take a look at the defensive alignment. They've got 4 down, which is what they did a lot. This is basically what the Colts were running most of the game. Some threatening too high shell, a lot of linebackers, and they're lined up trying to take away the Bears' options. So from here, they take the snap. Oh, I need to wind it back a little bit. Make sure that you watch Anthony Miller's motion here. If you guys see what I see, you're going to see that his man is following him. So what does that mean? Generally speaking, that means man coverage. So Foles sees it and he's thinking, okay, they must be in man. Well, when the ball is snapped, they're not. Here we go. They're in some kind of zone, and Foles has to identify it on the fly because he's already looking at David Montgomery, his quick option, because he's thinking, okay, if they're in man, then I can probably catch this linebacker running between a screen and see if David Montgomery can go make a play, because the guy can. He's a great player. But he notices, Foles, that his linebacker didn't move and that a safety's coming downhill, which shows him that it's not near the defensive look that he was thinking of. So instead, he pump fakes, that's him realizing it's not open, turns back into the middle of the field, and finds Anthony Miller wide open. I want to just go ahead and make sure that we can see how fast this is in real time. So, let's wait for it. Snap comes. He takes that look at David Montgomery, pumps, it's not there. Quick decision, bang, Anthony Miller gets the ball. I love seeing this because it's a very, very fast decision that comes from quickly understanding the defense at a glance and a pump fake and knowing where he needs to put the ball and being decisive with it. This is something Foles was pretty good at. He was pretty good at making decisions and getting the ball to where it needed to go. Another decent example is a quick 11-yard gain that the Bears got right here with Jimmy Graham, where he's able to put the ball into his playmaker's hands and set Jimmy up for at least some running room as the Bears got one of their first offensive drives of the third quarter going. Right here, he'll kill to the next play. Montgomery shifts over, doesn't really tell him anything as he takes the snap, looks to his right, doesn't like what he sees as he's got double coverage over here. This looks to him like some kind of cover 2, cover 3 shell, meaning that he needs to quickly get this ball to Graham as soon as he can to just try to maximize the yardage. He does. Graham makes a play after the catch, and bang, the Bears got 11 yards. This is the kind of quarterbacking that I actually think the Bears could build on. Sure, Foles needs to clean up accuracy, and they just can't miscommunicate near as often as they have, not only because of the missed opportunities that I showed you, but because I actually think it was also a miscommunication that led to the interception down the road to Anthony Miller. Now, I have no confirmation of this because it's very hard to tell. But putting together what Foles has said after the game and what it looks like during this play, it seems as if Anthony Miller, and of course I have to show you in frame by frame, throttles down trying to sit into a zone. So you're gonna have to take a look and see if you can see what I think I'm seeing. But Anthony Miller runs this route really fast, curls back, takes a quick second step that he doesn't normally take. I'll slow this down and we'll walk through it because I think Miller is realizing that if he takes this at full speed, he's going to run way too far into the zone too quickly. So he throttles down a little bit, but Foles tries to lead him, which leaves the ball way too far over the middle. It is not a good connection. It's something that I'm hoping will change with chemistry because when I look at what Foles did mechanically, he puts a great spiral on it. I think he puts the ball where he wants it to be as he snaps back and throws it. That looks like where he's trying to throw to. It's just not where Miller is, which obviously is a problem, and that's a miscommunication that can't happen again, but at least it's something that you can hope that over time, a guy who is now not going to be in his first start starting tomorrow, it'll be his second, obviously, that he can clean up with his receivers and that they're able to make plays that more remind us of that Atlanta game than they do this game right here, where I really don't want to see, just to back it up and show it one more time, with all the space that Miller's able to run into, I really don't see any reason for a quarterback to be missing a throw like this, regardless of the name on the jersey. And sure, Deadly Chicken, I would love for Miller to catch this too, but I'm not going to lie about how difficult that kind of catch is and how you'd prefer that ball to be, instead of, here, anywhere in this region, even if it's a little behind him. I'll hit, hey, Sean, I'll hit guys for dropping other balls. Like, there's certainly one that I think Miller dropped a little earlier in the fourth that he could have caught, but that one in particular, actually, most keel, I think that this is just too far out. If that ball is just right over here, it's really not that bad. You catch it and you pull it down. But because it's so far out, it makes it an incredibly difficult catch, and it's just not something that'll be acceptable going forward. But so overall, here we are, about 44 minutes in. Sam, honestly, with how open Miller gets, this is the right read, in my opinion. So let's go back and we can take another look at the play overall. Let's see, where is Darnell Mooney? Is he right there? So the trouble with Mooney is that the Bears are trying to pick up all 10 yards on this 3rd and 10, and Mooney's running right into traffic here. It's not that he's poor, and it's not that Mooney's a bad option. I think Mooney's one of our sparkling rookies, and the only reason he's not the best rookie that we have is because Jalen Johnson has been as good as he is. The trouble is that if you dump this ball off to Mooney, you're asking him to make a play against 3 potential defenders with guys who are probably going to be late to the blocking assignment because they don't have computer chips in their brain. If offensive players worked on a hive mind and had played together for years, maybe they would know to turn and potentially set up a blocking pattern for Mooney. But what Foles knows is that because this linebacker vacated the space, like, he should be, let's use the flashlight, anywhere inside the lit region, and he's not. That creates a throwing lane for Foles to sneak this ball behind the corner. And as you guys see, I mean, it's the right idea. It's just a bad throw. It's not a throw into traffic. It's not a throw into coverage. It's just a throw that, whether Miller had throttled down to try to give Foles more time to get the ball in, or Foles had just missed, this the idea is correct and the throw is not. So what am I trying to say with all this? Like, I'll give it to you guys straight. The Bears offense was very bad against a Colts defense that ate their lunch. There are plenty of other examples of plays that could have been made but weren't, partially due to somebody on the team messing up. A great example is this shot to Darnell Mooney, where Nick Foles is going to get a one-on-one look with Darnell because I believe this safety is going to rotate down, if I've got the play remembered correctly. Let's take a look and make sure, because this is one that, if I remember it correctly, there's interior pressure that gives Foles some real trouble no, I'm thinking of the wrong one. This is the Patterson kind of ridiculous play, which, by the way, in case anybody wants to get really conspiratorial, if you watch this guy right here, he's actually going to run over and bump Patterson, and Patterson ends up about a step slow. So, you know what? I'm not saying, but, maybe. But so going back to the Mooney catch, or not catch, it's just a throw that I want to go over. There are a couple of plays that we see later in I think it might have even been the first quarter, either it's the third. But so plenty of plays where the offensive line could have done a better job and held up for a guy that just isn't known as a mover. But there's basically, I could go around in circles and I could show you guys plenty of examples, because I have plenty of examples. The trouble is that there's a ton of blame to put around on this offense. Why in the world did Matt Nagy think that the Bears would be able to win a fist fight against the Indianapolis Colts, one of the best defenses in football? Why in the world did they continue to run a running scheme that basically pushes the ball as far up the middle as they can go? And I went ahead and found it, by the way. Here is a single high look that you're going to see right here, along with Darnell Mooney in what looks like as close to one-on-one coverage as Foles will get. So he'll take a look and confirm what's happening after the snap, right? So he's going to take this snap and he's going to watch the safety, and he's even going to throw a hard look, as you can see, over here to this side of the field. That's going to move this safety. I'll go ahead and restart the play motion off of his spot and in the direction of that right side play. So the safety turns his hips over there, and as soon as he does, Foles, if you can already tell, has shifted his body back towards Mooney, who is going to run into tons of space. Look at all this space that Mooney has to run into and Foles has to throw the ball into. The trouble is that if you watch the actual line, you're going to see that DeForest Buckner right here basically gets a hand directly in Foles' face as he swims over Cody Whitehair and then challenges Foles. And Foles lets this go leaning way, way backwards right here. He lets it go from it's a tough angle to tell. But the point is, because I've seen this on the broadcast and you see it in the All-22, that if had he gotten maybe about a split second more protection, he might have been able to see that Darnell Mooney's on the inside of his corner and he's got tons of this room to work with that the safety's never going to get to. Instead, he basically launches a prayer on 2nd and 18 and tries to get the ball out of harm's way, which is a huge bummer because this could have been a big play for the Bears. It does see, Jasper, he may very well have been trying to throw to the number and not the receiver. You may very well be right. My impression is that Foles sees the issue coming forward at him and just tries to launch the ball down the field, because I've seen Case Keenum do similar things with Terry McLaurin, just for instance, throughout 2019, and Mooney has got a ton of inside room, and I would think that the Bears would want to use it, but it's all guesswork at this point. The trouble is that there's tons of blame to go around, and the play caller's not exempt. I mean, let's take a look at this 3rd and 1 play. Remember the situation? It's 16-3 in the early 4th quarter with a 3rd and 1 that, as Nagy has talked about, he wanted to go for it, assuming the Bears didn't even get it. So what do they line up to do? They run, as you could probably guess, outside zone for Cordero Patterson. Just like this, with a moving guy out of the box. It's really not a bad play design outside of the fact that Patterson gets the handoff and, oh boy, he just runs straight into his lineman and loses a yard. Here's the trouble. Patterson, if he'd had any vision, could have seen that once he gets this handoff, you're going to see James Daniels and Cody Whitehair not really win anything. There's not a ton of room over here, but this backside angle actually has some daylight, and Patterson never actually sees it. He just runs straight into the meat grinder, and the Bears get absolutely nothing. But again, if you take a look at this blocking setup, even though Cody Whitehair and James Daniels don't get much, a quick cut right here where he goes left up this lane might just get the yards the Bears are looking for. Now, Oren, what you just asked is a great question. It's exactly why I got so frustrated when I went back and watched this tape. What in the world is Matt Nagy doing calling this run for Cordero Patterson? This is a David Montgomery run, like to a T. So what's he doing? I'm sure in his eyes, it's just because Cordell Patterson's 230 pounds and he runs pretty quick so he can get ahead of steam and just slam into the line. The trouble is that's not really how running back works. You need to be able to have that vision that's really key as far as making plays go. And as we saw in a later 3rd and 2 run, David Montgomery is able to make those plays in very similar settings, which, by the way, this is as good a chance as any to watch one of the better Cole Kmet blocks that I've seen, because right here he comes across, smashes the guy in the end, Montgomery sees it, runs, and gets 6 yards. So what in the world? I don't know. But basically, what I have seen, I don't think this was a fluky offensive performance. I think the best way that I could put it is it's a cold shower. It was a moment of truth. It was a way for us to see that the Bears have a lot of work to do, not just from the quarterback potentially needing to play better, but missed blocking assignments like I've shown, poor performance from the offensive line in both running and passing situations. The receivers, I could show you a couple of bad routes if that's something you're into. There were a couple of drops here and there. RPOs actually had some success, very little success blocking on screens. Basically, I could summarize all of this into one tiny sentence. There was almost nobody on the Chicago Bears that won their one-on-one matchup consistently, and that includes Matt Nagy against Frank Reich. the offensive line, generally speaking, they lost their matchup almost every time. Allen Robinson really couldn't generate much separation against Xavier Rhodes. In fact, one of the plays that I would point to, and you could make the argument it's one of the tone setters, here we are, 3rd and 3. The Bears call a play where the whole goal of the play is to get Allen Robinson here one-on-one in space on a slant. And what happens? Foles is going to take this snap. He's going to look to his right, which the whole goal is to just move the linebackers. And right there, Allen Robinson can't haul it in. And it's not to say that Allen Robinson did anything like wrong. It's more to say that right here, Xavier Rhodes is going to win this one-on-one as Robinson can't quite get enough separation to stop Rhodes from deflecting away a pass that's placed pretty much right where you'd ask it to be. This is just a rough game to watch. I mean, there is legitimate hope that we could get better. Like, especially against defenses that aren't as talented as the Colts. The Colts is one of the best in the league for a reason. The Bears basically just got beat down at their own game. They tried to run outside zone. It didn't work. They tried to get things going with screens. That didn't work. They tried to keep things underneath, and the Colts were able to stop them with really, really nice one-on-one plays just like this. And it's probably not pass interference. It's probably right on the line, but yeah, I mean, that's the summation of what happened to this offense. They got picked apart by a very, very good defense that basically forced them to be as West Coast as possible, and they just weren't ready for it. I saw, for instance, I have the Bears down for 8 communication issues that botch different plays. And that includes things like Cordero Patterson's vision, but it also includes that Seattle botch that we saw with a missed blocking assignment. That includes the issue with the draw play. That includes the Miller interception. That includes the Mooney deep shot with Buckner's potential burst up the line. There were so many communication and execution issues that you combine that you say the Bears could actually iron some of these out, and they might be able to push the ball down, or they might be able to not only get the ball down the field, but move the ball with some consistency. It was tough in this game. My hope is that maybe they'll be able... Yeah, Jasper, that was tough. The fact that draw play, I'll show it again, came out of... This whole fiasco came out of a timeout was a real bummer. It's not that. It's this one right here. There was a lot to dislike. There was a lot of reason for the Bears to end up as not only embarrassed, but the Bears fan base to be as upset as they were. This was not a very good looking football game, and especially coming after a quarterback change, it was really nothing to rally around. But you know what? I'm not certain things will change against Tampa Bay, but I think they'll do better tomorrow night. They've certainly got a Tampa Bay defense that, frankly, they're better up front. But if the Bears over these last 4 days were able to work on a couple of those West Coast concepts and can try to get the ball out and utilize the fact that Foles is a pretty darn good quick passer, the Bears may actually be able to have some success on offense and put some points on the board and hope that home field advantage on a Thursday night takes over from there. We'll see. To me, the big test coming up, as silly as it sounds, is that Carolina game. Carolina's got a pretty solid offense, and the Bears are going to have to be able to shoot with the Panthers in order to succeed. And I think by then we'll see them against a defense that'll give them an adequate test, because that defense isn't very good. And then they'll head off into playing the Rams and the Saints and the rest of this gauntlet that the defenses aren't near as good as the Colts or the Buccaneers, but their offenses are better, so ours will have to perform. I'm not going to look you in the eyes and tell you this was a good offensive performance. But what I will tell you is that past a certain point, Cody Whitehair, who, for instance, he may be the Bears' best offensive lineman, but I think we'd all agree he's above average by league standards, still can't stand up to DeForest Buckner. And when you don't have a lineman that can do that, he's going to eat your lunch if you run up the middle. My hope is that just like we saw on Sunday, we will get to see what Matt Nagy has throughout the rest of this year with a quarterback that offers no excuses. I'm okay with this. I know that there's probably going to be some serious downs, and my hope is that we'll get some ups to go with them. But in terms of this offensive game, you could point to game plan, you'd be correct. You could point to offensive line execution. You'd be correct. You could say it's the quarterback's fault, and I'd say I think that that's being a little short-sighted. He definitely made some mistakes and some things he needs to clean up on, but I would circle back and say this was a team loss, and everybody on offense played a part in this whole thing, only scoring about 3 points. And yeah, Rob, perspective is weird, isn't it? But yeah, this mic's pretty big. But anyways, at this point, I want to open it up for questions. That's all. It's not all the offensive analysis that I could offer, but everything else would be minutia, and we have hit about an hour. At this point, let's go with a true Q&A. What do you want to ask about? I've left the whole defensive side of the ball open, and I got plenty of plays I could show you there. I could also show you some of the RPOs because, hey, you know what? Let's start with one of those because there's one in the first quarter that I thought was really cool because Foles ran it well, and it's not in the way that you probably thought it would be. So here the Bears are on 3rd and 1, right? And believe it or not, they turned to okay, of course it says 3rd and 2 there, just to really show me off. But so the Bears are going to call an RPO that's going to see Allen Robinson, just so you know what's coming, option out like this, and remember that Foles, watching the key, is going to be watching this guy right here. Okay? So he takes the snap. The guy hesitates for just long enough that Foles hands the ball off, and Montgomery and the line are able to grind out a total of 2 yards, but it's enough for the first down. If you watch this back, you'll see what Foles saw. So he's way out there on the end of the line, and Foles is going to quickly make the decision. He's staring. He hesitates just long enough to give it away to Montgomery, and Montgomery slams into the line and just pushes the whole pile forward for 2-3 yards, which, by the way, if you don't love David Montgomery, what in the world? Like, this guy is so fun to watch. He's not the world's greatest running back, and he certainly doesn't fit a lot of the outside zone because he's much more of an inside runner. But, man, that guy's got great contact balance, and he's so fun to see. It'll be interesting to see what Matt Nagy does with the RPOs that I know are the underpinning of a lot of his specific style of West Coast. Because as you see, there's Allen right there, just in case he needs to get the pass. But the Bears are able to pick up yards with an RPO on the ground, and they pick up a couple more in the air, but we can get that later. So let's see. I'll tell you what, Biscuit, I have no idea what Mitch is going to do. At this point, my guess would be that, yeah, it is funny. At this point, when it comes to Mitch, my guess is that the Bears are going to let him go. At this point, he is now a 4th-year rookie that has fallen out of grace with his system, apparently fallen out of grace with his coach, and doesn't have his 5th-year option. So he's like a lot of unrestricted free agents that'll just hit the end of the year looking for a new contract, and my personal guess is that the Bears are going to go let him pick up a contract somewhere else, for better or for worse. At this point, if you asked me, I think he needs a change of scenery. I hate saying that, but I'll give you an example. Boston traded Tyler Seguin from that's the Boston Bruins in the NHL, traded center Tyler Seguin from Boston to the Dallas Stars, and his career resurged. The Texas Rangers traded away an outfielder named Chris Davis to the Orioles, and he started playing really, really well. Actually, he's a first baseman. But the point is that when it comes to Mitch, I tend to think his time with the Bears is done. I do think, for what it's worth, he got a fair chance. And not only did he struggled in those first 2.5 games, ended up getting pulled because the Falcons were beating us the way that they were, and Foles was able to lead it back. The point isn't to get back into Mitch. It's just to answer quickly that I do think that his clock has ticked, and it's probably over for Trubisky in Chicago, barring a Foles injury, which I'll tell you what, that's not unrealistic. If you take a look at the way Foles plays, he takes a lot of hits. And when I saw him take this one, as he was delivering this ball to Patterson, hoo boy, I thought he was hurt. I thought he was definitely hurt. Sam, I think that Mitch would actually do really well in a system, like in terms of how he would do best. I think that his best chance was in the outside zone system that we were running that leaned on play action a lot in the first 2.5 weeks. I think the whole reason Matt Nagy fell out of favor with Mitch Trubisky, or the other way around, is because we were running Mitch Trubisky's perfect system, and he still wasn't succeeding. And again, here's that shot to the leg Foles took that they picked up the flag on. But either way, that's a tough hit you don't want your quarterback taking. Again, it's yeah, and it may very well be roughing the passer, but it's something Foles takes a lot of. You remember the play that he made throwing to the L on Anthony Miller? It was a problem. But so, anyways, I think that personally, I don't know what Mitch's development is going to look like. I thought I knew what Josh Allen's was going to look like, and here he is looking like an MVP. But he's doing it in his third year. Mitch was still struggling in his fourth. The move I don't have any issue with the move. I don't think the Bears would have been any better under Mitch when it came to this Colts defense. And frankly, I appreciate the direction they're trying to push the offense, even if there were way too many communication issues and just execution issues across the board. Because surprise, surprise, when your offense is Allen Robinson and then a whole bunch of other people that aren't near at Allen's level, they're not going to play very well against the best defense in football. So in terms of like when they're going to draft a quarterback, let's get to that at another time because we have a ton of season left. And truth be told, I don't actually know how many games the Bears are going to win. If they go 10-6, it's going to be tough for them to draft a quarterback, especially because, and as you guys may know, I have a whole video that specifically talks about how Charles Leno, in my opinion, is a very average left tackle, for better or for worse. He makes average level play, and I mean, as we see in the early third quarter, average just isn't really good enough against Justin Houston here, as he tears through Leno like it's absolutely nothing. I mean, gracious, you're going to see Danico Autry and Justin Houston just rip through the line, and I believe Whitehair gets beat too. Oh, no, he kicks out to the side, and that's where he gets beat. But Leno certainly doesn't stop his guy, Justin Houston, in this case, and it leads to an almost like laughable sack where Foles never stood a chance. But the point is that here it's a painful one, chicken. So Leno tends to play pretty well, but he's not an all-star, and at some point, as he comes up to 30, the Bears may need to replace him, and the only real way to replace left tackles, based on what I've seen, is to draft somebody in the first round, and the Bears don't have a lot of first-round picks, so if this is the year for the Bears to go 10-6, make the playoffs, maybe you just ride with Foles for another year, as disappointing as that may sound to some, and draft your left tackle and get there when you can. But either way, let me take a look at the other questions that we've got. I don't know if the Lamar Miller move is going to amount to much. I really don't know, because I don't know what Lamar Miller has left in the tank. I'd love to say, oh yeah, Lamar Miller, we're going to get like the 1,000-yard guy, the run and pass threat that we got at Houston, but I doubt it. I mean, just take a look at what 1 year's done to Danny Trevathan. He's rounding into much better shape. He's not near as poor as he was for the first few weeks, but you can tell he's slowly losing a step every year that he stays in the NFL, and that's the normal way of things. So how good is Lamar Miller? I have no idea. We'll have to actually see him play. The Buccaneers are a weird defensive matchup because I'll tell you first, straight out, that the Bears offense is pretty limited. I mean, Nick Foles is the perfect example of what our offense is, right? Good decision maker, okay thrower, not a mover at all. Limited. This offense has Allen Robinson. It doesn't have its primary versatile running back in Tariq Cohen because he is a passing weapon. So that means that you're left with Anthony Miller, who I love his talent. He was my first breakdown ever, but he is so unbelievably inconsistent that you just can't really count on him. What this kind of means is that the Bears have Cole Kmet, who hasn't really turned into anything yet. We have Jimmy Graham. We have Demetrius Harris, which isn't saying much. We have Darnell Mooney, who looks great, but like to the tune of 600 yards. We have Allen Robinson, and that's kind of the offense. Plus David Montgomery, who I really like, and he made quite a couple plays in the pass game. For instance, this is the kind of stuff I'll show right here that I think David Montgomery could not only be really useful when he does, but it's something that you're going to see a whole lot more of. So here's one to Jimmy Graham. I'm getting to Montgomery's, but I want to show this while we're here. This is a quick just tight end hit where the Bears are going to identify this linebacker as somebody in a one-on-one matchup that they want for just a quick confidence-boosting pass where, bang, they hit him. That's very West Coast. I just had to show you guys that because that's West Coast offense, and that's probably what we'll see quite a bit of. But right here, the Bears do something that against pass rushes that aren't the Buccaneers and aren't the Colts, I think you're going to see a whole lot of. The Colts are going to drop a ton of guys into basically it's either cover 2 or it's cover 3. And remember, that means a lot of safeties that take away deep shots. But so they fall off the line, like you see right there. They drop into what looks like a cover 3 set. See, these 3 are defending the back with linebackers that are sinking. And there David Montgomery is with plenty of space. He does what really good running backs do, catches, makes a play, and falls forward. Bears get 8 yards on first down. This is the kind of stuff that I think you're going to see David Montgomery make some serious money on in this specific season. That's a lot of what Tariq Cohen was known for, but he's out of the lineup. So the next guy up is David Montgomery, and he's certainly not a bad option because as we saw in the in this game, the Bears were able to have some plays where, gracious alive, this was one of my favorites. It's not exactly an incredible play from anybody. It's just this is what chemistry looks like, believe it or not, where Foles is going to keep his eyes downfield, recognize that he needs to hit his check down quickly, zip a ball over to Montgomery, and Montgomery makes a really nice play in space. Running backs are dangerous when it comes to breaking tackles, especially against defensive backs that are accustomed to wide receivers. So right there, he makes a move, he pushes forward, and he gets 17 yards. These are the kinds of things that if the Bears offense can evolve a little bit, I would love to see it. And exactly like you're saying, Jasper, the placement's fabulous in terms of this pass in particular. So the Bears offense, getting back to their matchup against the Buccaneers, when they're playing almost any defense that probably isn't in the top 10, I think that they're able to do a little better than they are against the top 1. I mean, think back to the Bears defense in 2018, for instance. We all saw it. That defense was legendary, right? And it made some teams, think Kirk Cousins and the Vikings, look absolutely toothless. Does that sound familiar to what the Colts did against us? I think it does. It's trouble. Because on one hand, I could sit here and tell you the Colts were mashing us. I'll show you just how good Rock Ya-Sin was. There's this play right here to Darnell Mooney where Darnell Mooney runs a only kind of bad route. You guys are going to see this. So his route here is an up and an out. And the key here is that Mooney has to sell he's running a go. If he doesn't sell he's running a go, this corner's never going to turn his hips to run upfield and create room for Foles to throw this out route. But Mooney, after moving in, so he moves in here. This is where Foles sees he's got an opportunity because he's got his guy playing in off coverage. Great. So Mooney runs up, and right about here, he turns in just a little bit so that when he makes his break, Rock Ya-Sin is right on him and deflects the pass away. If you watch this again, you'll see it. It's the smallest tip, but as soon as Mooney turns in just that little bit, Rock stops his hips and is ready to break on this pass the instant it gets thrown. I'm not going to say something corny like, Foles is lucky this didn't get intercepted, because that's not really true. It's a pretty safe pass, and it got deflected for a reason. But I will point out that this is the kind of thing where it's an imperfect route. It's not perfect, and because it's imperfect, the Colts corners are just a little bit too good to do that against. They knock away this 3rd and 6 as if it's no big deal. And you know what? We'd be super excited if that was Kyle Fuller and Jalen Johnson, so I totally understand, and I'll tip my cap to a good defensive player that's having a very good season. But it does point out that our offense is probably not going to go up against the best of the best and win a bunch of 1v1s, and I doubt that surprises anybody, but against the Colts, I think it's important to know because it resulted in 3 points. And like you're saying, Davon, you could throw it a little lower, maybe, but it's not a bad throw. And that's a lot of what Foles does, is he'll put a ball in the vicinity. He's not a Hall of Fame quarterback. You don't need a Hall of Fame quarterback to have some success. And in my opinion, Reinhard, it's one of the better options on the field. I've watched a couple of these, and it doesn't exactly look like the Bears get anybody crazy open outside of that. Allen Robinson's here for a quick tackle and down. Anthony Miller I don't think he comes open. He pretty much only comes open because this linebacker peeks in. But so this Mooney throw isn't a bad one if Mooney's route convinces Rock Ya that he's going that way. But it doesn't, and Rock makes the play, and it's not great for the Bears. The point is that these are the sorts of plays that I look at as great evidence for the limitations on the Bears offense. But yeah, so let's get back to some other questions, because I see y'all talking about potential future offseason things, but we'll see. I mean, we'll get there when we get there. If the Bears go 6-10, which is on the table, then they're in a very different position than they are at 10-6. If different people get hurt, that changes things. I didn't go into this season thinking Cohen was going to get hurt, for instance. Now he's got an ACL issue. So we need to let the season play out before we start thinking about drafting too much, because frankly, this is a big season to figure out just who Matt Nagy is and what it's going to, and whether he's going to be the Bears offensive genius that we want him to be, or whether it's just all snake oil. And I haven't made my mind up yet. Certainly I've seen some things mostly with Mitch and with Chase Daniel that give me hope that he's really creative and could work like really, really well. But I mean, this game was rough, and we'll see what happens on Thursday. I'm waiting until a good couple of games to really like make a decision there. But so, and I'm sure plenty of you guys think Nagy's an idiot. That's fine. To me, Nagy's got that same edge that Andy Reid does at his best, but his worst is really poor, and he needs to figure out where he is in the middle. So, Davon, if you actually like watch, most of the time Foles doesn't stare down anybody. In this case, I think he's going to take a look at the corner or not the corner. He's going to watch the safety for the overwhelming majority of it, and then he turns and he fires. So he's not really staring him down as much as he knows where he's going to go the whole time. But this is what Nick Foles is better at, I think, than Trubisky. He watches the safety. He knows where he's going. He then turns, makes his throw. It's just a nice play. But, yeah, no, Mitch stares down the receivers. He does that a lot. But yeah, okay, so somebody said Bilal Nichols. That's a great time to talk about defense, because I'll tell you what, for as much as I thought this defense was going to really struggle against the Colts running game, they didn't. And a lot of that's credit, believe it or not, to Chuck Pagano, and a lot of it's credit to, we can't sign Snacks anymore. He is a Seahawk. But so a lot of it's also credit to Pagano. There's a play that I've got to show you guys right here where Pagano smokes the Indianapolis offense with a stunt, and it is something beautiful. I mean, so right here, you're going to see, oh boy, yeah, let's get a better angle than that. So right here, going back to the play, you're going to see Pagano generate defensive run stopping by sending Akeem Hicks downhill on a stunt, and Khalil Mack runs into absolute open space and eats the running back alive. He being Pagano, pressure on their running game like crazy. And you know who really stepped up? Akeem Hicks. The guy is playing very, very good football, and it's very reminiscent of just how good he was in that, like, oh so fun to watch, what was it, 2018 season. This is a big time play from Hicks right here in the end zone, or the red zone. I believe it's a 2nd and 13 is what it said, but Hicks right here is going to toss his guy aside and make a play on this running down that is just, I mean, it's awesome. So he chucks his guy away, runs forward, makes the play. Akeem Hicks is one of the only real run stoppers that we have this year, like consistently. And even against a Colts defense, like, man, or against a Colts offensive line that's known for being really good, he was fabulous. what's his name? Bilal Nichols. He made a lot of plays all throughout the game. There's one that I'll highlight right here where it's a 6-yard gain and you're going to see it, but Nichols does a very good job of handling his men. But yeah, Hicks did get a lot of great stuff going on. I think I've got the wrong play. But you know what? If you guys want to watch this one, this is a fun one from Roquan Smith, who just heads straight. Ooh. No, this is exactly the one I was thinking of, unfortunately. So it's a 6-yard gain, but I want you to watch Nichols on this snap. Right there, he's going to bust through the line. You probably didn't see it. He's right here. It happens pretty quick. Bilal Nichols has had a fairly strugglesome season, but in this game in particular, he was very good about getting loose like that. And sure, Mack misses the tackle, which is rare. That doesn't happen, and this is not some secret let's roast Khalil Mack session. But Nichols gets that leverage, which you want to see from a lineman, and he makes a play. Secret code, by the way, like some little insight. If there's one thing that I think Nichols did really well, or an opportunity that was created for him, it's that I didn't see him have to fight almost any double teams. The Bears, namely Chuck Pagano, to his credit, did a very, very good job of letting Bilal Nichols play the end position on a 5-man front. So if you take a look at this means that Nichols doesn't have to be the direct nose tackle. He doesn't have to sit right there. And the Colts blocking assignments just tended to not make him play against 2 people at once, which is pretty much the number one thing that if I was scheming a defense, I would never have Bilal Nichols do. He's 300 pounds. Hicks is 330, if just 330. And Nichols doesn't have the strength to take on those double teams. But as you see here against the left guard, I believe, he cuts straight through 56, pushes the guy outside. Mack doesn't quite get the tackle. Everybody kind of gets surprised by it, and they end up getting 6 yards. So the trouble when it comes to Mack, because you mentioned that Van Halen, but Khalil Mack has been a very, very, very good run defender, and he's been pressuring the passer like crazy. He's just not getting any credit for it, which is a real bummer because I think he's playing really good football. I like to think that I've been honest enough that you know that I'm going to tell you if I think somebody's underperforming, and Mack's contract makes him incredibly hard to judge, right? Because, I mean, let's be honest, at $23 million, it seems as if Mack needs to be getting a sack on almost every play. But plays like this remind you of just exactly who this guy is you're dealing with. Watch him against this tight end here. Ooh, I definitely didn't get that quite in time. Let's take a look right here. Mack's on the end, and just go ahead and watch him as he's going to delete his man, rush in, and slam the running back into James Vaughters, who makes the play. There's a whole lot of situations, and I'm seeing people talk about it in the comments. I want to address it. When it comes to why a defender would be dropped into coverage, I actually find it pretty interesting. Not because it's like smart, and I'm not about to make some argument that Mack needs to be dropped into coverage all the time. Obviously, he doesn't. He's a fabulous rusher. But what is kind of funny when it comes to why these guys get dropped into coverage, it's basically a bluff. So most of the time, in case anybody's curious, you want to line up all the scary guys that you can on the offensive line. Say you want to line up a bunch of blitzers, but you're not going to blitz everybody. You're going to send some guys and force the offensive line to have to read and react. So when it comes to Mack dropping into coverage, a lot of times it's because they're sending somebody like Roquan, and then they'll drop Mack off because there's a lot of times 2 guys tied to him that need to figure out somebody else to block, and you might catch them outside of an assignment. Now, somebody mentioned the refs. Oh yeah, and the dropped interception was flat out tragic. I mean, Barkevius Mingo made a really, really nice play on that one, and it was just too bad to see it fail. But there's one play that I want to talk about because it really does have me worried, and I'm about to enter my my annual, because I feel like I always kind of have to talk about the refs at some point, and I know it's really, really popular for everybody to talk about the refs at some point and be like, they're calling it against us, or we need that. I try to be as objective as I can, and I'm starting to see some stuff. I talked about this 2 weeks ago with the Giants game in a hold. I want you guys to watch Roquan Smith and what happens here. So I don't know if you saw that. I'll go ahead and wind it back just in case you can watch it in slow-mo, but this is a pretty blatant third down, 12-yard gain that gets created from pretty obvious offensive pass interference. I mean, the guy puts his head down, pushes Roquan out of the way, and catches the ball. I mean, you are kidding me, right? How did this not get called? And I don't look at this like, wow, it's just a missed call. Like, too bad. Imagine if that had gone the other way. I'm actually going to give you guys a different take. So the NFL isn't calling offensive holding at near the rate that they were calling it last year. They're not calling offensive pass interference at any other week besides week 1, if memory serves. And this is a great example of a worry that I have, where maybe, just maybe, the officiating is starting to so favor the offense that the offenses are getting away with all kinds of crazy stuff that makes defensive teams like the Bears, it just sort of puts them in hot water. And this is the kind of stuff that, you know what, if this is legal, I hope that the Bears kind of start doing it. But it's a real bummer to see because, I mean, this is pretty much blatantly illegal. Like, to use an example, what in the world is Roquan supposed to do here? He's covering his man, he gets pushed out of the way, and he gives up a third down for it. I mean, I'll go find another example that I've got for you where Eddie Jackson gets caught in a situation where he's going to actually get flagged for pass interference, and I don't know what he's supposed to do. I mean, like, let's go ahead and watch this. I'll identify Eddie Jackson for you. He's basically going to sit under a duck ball with the receiver Pascal, who's got just enough inside leverage. But I mean, he ends up getting flagged for interference here, even though the receiver comes down with it. And I sit here and, like, I'll slow it down right at this moment. The defender, in my opinion, is close enough to where he should be able to do just about whatever he wants. He's earned the right. The quarterback's not throwing into, like, open space. In my opinion, this is a moment where a defender ought to be able to make a play on the ball. But the fact that the flag came out for defensive pass interference, even though, as we see, Pascal's the one who makes a really good catch on it, I mean, gracious alive, what in the world's the guy supposed to do? It's ridiculous to me. I mean, as I watch this and as I watch things like that Giants game that I'm sure you guys remember, seeing Mac just get held and held and held and held and held and held, it really makes me worry for this defense in terms of what they are allowed to do against offenses like the Buccaneers this weekend. The Buccaneers are missing their top 2 receivers, as assuming that Evans is somewhat limited. So if Evans is limited, similar to Julio Jones against the Bears, except, you know, now that I think about it, he was declared out. But that means that they'll be missing Evans and Godwin. So what are the Buccaneers going to do? Because I'm sure the NFL wants Tom Brady and the Buccaneers to score points. And by the way, not to scare anybody, but have we thought about just how revenge hungry these Buccaneers probably are? We're talking about Fournette is out, by the way. We're talking about Tom Brady's first game against Nick Foles. And you know Tom Brady is a competitive guy. And it's his first game since the Super Bowl that he lost, and Nick Foles beat him in such a way that he won Super Bowl MVP. I mean, you think that's not hanging onto his brain? Because I do. It's Bruce Arians playing against the Bears. Again, he loves, I think, these games against the Bears because, as you remember, he was the guy who was in line for the Bears job until Phil Emery handed it to Mark Trestman. It's also the first defensive rematch for any Tampa Bay defender against this Bears offense that hung 48 points on them with Mitchell Trubisky. This is a revenge game and a half for Tampa Bay, and it's one that, I gotta be honest with you, I'm not super excited to see our team in. I hope we do well. I hope we surprise me. But coming off of this game, I'm not 100% sure how quickly they're going to be able to cement things on the offense. It's why I mentioned the Carolina game earlier, but I hope they succeed. I do. It's a Bears game. I'm always cheering for them. But this is a game where, believe it or not, I think the offensive line will have its handful to just pigeon off of what you're saying, Davon, with Ndamukong Suh, Shaq Barrett, and Jason Pierre-Paul, and plenty of the other players that they've got on that defensive line. I'm worried about our offensive line, and I hope they surprise me. But if we pencil this in as a loss, the Bears still have an opportunity to go 4-2, like out of this first 6 game. But like you're saying, Jared, I want to see improvement out of the offense. We'll see what happens. So there were still a whole bunch of other plays that the Bears were able to make in both run game and pass game. Especially like, do you guys want to see coverage? Do you guys want to see more run stuff? Because Nichols, for instance, I'll find the play right now. He had a couple of really, really, really nice plays that came up, or that ultimately cemented itself into a pretty solid game from Bilal Nichols. Nothing incredible, but especially when you remember that the guy's a 5th-round pick, he is playing at a level that is really, really positive now in his 3rd year and could be a legitimate rotational lineman, maybe even a starter down the road. Right here, you will see, let's find Nichols. Nichols is right there. I highlighted this one because he has a really nice first step there that rips through the line. It ultimately just ends up creating penetration and a little bit of chaos, but the fact that he's able to get off the line as quickly as he is nice, because that's very reminiscent of his rookie year. So as far as like what we can do about the defensive line, that's where, believe it or not, I think if Matt Nagy leans into his West Coast roots, I think that we may have a better shot than any other game plan. So you get the ball out on the sidelines, you pass quickly, you basically try to run the game plan that the Eagles ran back in 2018 against our defense. And that's a very similar thing to what they did. But what the Colts mainly, if I was just going to be so bold as to say it, the Colts did a really good job of not only converting on their opportunities, but catching breaks and making it work. They used a ton of picking action. Let me find you a good example right now. So here the Bears are, they're going to get 12 yards off of what is effectively a downfield pick play. And I mean, these things worked great. I've got like 4 examples of, oh no, actually, this is just a really good blocking play, because the Colts offense had a couple of these where they, for instance, you're going to see this guy catch a whole bunch of basically like unusual blocking angles, as Hicks is probably thinking that the blocking, of course, would be coming from there or there. I believe it comes from there. This guy goes over there. They basically run like a big fancy trap play, and they execute it to perfection. It works really well. And you know what? Sometimes you got to tip your hat to an offense, because when they get a lane like that, all off of just well done blocking, you say, okay, that was pretty good. But that's why in the NFL you have to drive all the way down the field. One play doesn't set up a drive, nor should it change your opinion about a good defense. What really surprised me was that I saw a ton of these pick plays that I need to that I want to talk through, because hopefully the Bears could try to steal some of them. I thought a lot of them actually worked pretty well. And let's get into it here. So you're going to see Trey Burton pick up what looks like the easiest first down of his life right here, where if you watch the ball, you're going to ask where the coverage is. And I'll tell you where it is. It's stuck. So Trey Burton, he catches that. He's obviously like really, really open. But if you go back and you watch this slowly, you'll see that, let's see. So Trey Burton's guy, I think it's Gibson. And Gibson's going to get fouled up right here by Screen, who's just sitting in his way because of that slight subtle pick. So then Gibson has to go around. He's obviously in nowhere to actually contest this catch, and Burton is able to run out of bounds nice and easily. The Colts ran a lot of these in terms of just general picking actions, and they were easily the easiest yards that they got because, I mean, hey, if you do it right, it's really, really easy. It's just tough to do. Because if the teams switch on these picks, basically, then they're able to run you down, often for short gains. But you'll see another one here where I can't remember who gets picked on this play. I just have it marked down as a pick. And let's see here. Yeah, okay, so if you guys caught it, looks like Burton again is going to set this pick, and he's going to push off Roquan. So once he gets out there, he creates traffic for that looks like, Quan to get out there, and Trevathan, okay, ultimately make the tackle, but he doesn't get there near in time, and the running back is able to jet out some very, very quick yards. So I totally get what you mean, Jasper. You could try to anticipate it. The trouble is that if you're wrong, you might give up a touchdown. That's a whole lot of the trouble with a lot of these picks and the way that the Bears tend to play them. They like to play a lot of man on third down. That's a known thing. Pagano will let his guys go get him on third down. And you know what? I totally get the feeling, because I've heard a lot of it, that the Bears weren't near as dominant under Pagano as they were under Vic Fangio. And while I totally get the feeling, I do want to remind everybody that Vic Fangio had some pretty awful defenses for the first 3 years of his Bears career. They got slowly better and better and better. Fringe top 10 in 2017, dominant, maybe legendary in 2018. In 2019 and 2020, I think Chuck Pagano's played a lot of more conservative defense because he's known for pretty much the entire season that the offense was going to struggle to score. So because they were going to potentially struggle to score, that means that he needs to make sure that he's not blitzing too much, or else he'll give up something downfield that the offense may not be able to get back to him. And you're totally right, Sam. I mean, it's not super fair to say Vic Fangio was bad for the first 2 years, because our defense was just terrible in terms of the talent that it had. And who knows? I wouldn't be surprised if Vic Fangio's a better defensive coordinator than Pagano. The trouble is that when you take a legendary defense that loses its coordinator and the next guy that comes in is still really good, I get complaining. I just don't think we need to be complaining too much, because the defense isn't bad, if that makes sense. I don't know. I look at this team, and what I keep saying to myself is that the defense is like the 5th best defense in the NFL by most metrics. It's a very good defense. It plays the pass really, really well, and the offense needs to be better. And as much as I could ask for more out of the defense, obviously I would love it if Roquan caught that interception in the end zone, or if Khalil Mack pulled down a gift that could have gotten us a touchdown, maybe, or at least 3 points. Look at this defense. I say 19 points should win you the football game. You guys can take a look at this bar up here. You're going to notice that there's 11 teams that scored 30 or more points, and there's 6 teams that scored 19 or less. The league is scoring this year, and the Bears need to be able to keep up. And it's tough when you watch this offense against this defense, because it looks totally hopeless. But I need to see a couple more games before I really start hammering them, because I saw tons of guys that left yards on the field, whether it was for a bad block in pass pro, poor issues running the ball. I mean, you guys all know this. We all probably agree. You're never going to get anywhere running for, what is this, like 30 combined yards on probably 15, 16. I guess it's technically going to say that it's 16 carries, but it's closer to the 14 that you see here between Montgomery, Patterson, and Mooney. And while I get that there are some people that are going to say, we abandoned the run, honestly, I feel like it was a lost cause anyways. And feel free to disagree with me on that. I just am a total believer that if the run's not working and you've given it an honest try, you don't need to keep doing it, or you've got to find like better ways to do it. With what the Bears were doing, running that outside zone up the middle, they were just going to get destroyed. So let me take a drink of water. So as far as what this means for guys like Artavis Pierce and the Thursday night game, I don't know much about Pierce. We didn't get the chance to see him play in camp, and I love watching these guys against NFL players. But like you're saying, Jasper, when it comes to this offense, they're going to need to shuffle things up. I don't know what it's going to look like on Thursday night, but I do think the offense is going to get better, because I don't think anybody goes from getting embarrassed to getting embarrassed again unless your name is somebody like Mark Trestman. And if Nagy does that, that'll be a huge problem. I mean, it'll be one that he'll have to string together a couple of really good offensive games to kind of make up for. But the home team tends to win about 66% of the games on Thursday Night Football. And while the Bears are the underdog by about 4 points, which traditionally means Tampa Bay is going to win the game, I do think that there is a decent thing, or like there's a decent reason to suggest that a 43-year-old Tom Brady might have more trouble against a real NFL defense with only 3 days of rest and travel from Tampa to Chicago, and it's not going to be cold, which is a huge bummer because Brady at 43 on Thursday night in the cold would probably be the best way to get him. But instead, he's got two receivers majorly limited, Fournette's out, and while the Bears offense has to be able to move the ball against a good defense, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to suggest that this could be an off night in the making for the Buccaneers. I'll sell it to you straight. I mean, if the Buccaneers come out and they play their game, they're probably going to score, let's say, 21, 24 points, and that's probably too much for the Bears offense to handle. But if the Bears defense can make a play or two, collect a turnover. Brady's thrown a couple of pick sixes this season. Make a play, especially if they could score points. This one's winnable. That's what I would tell you it is. Like, winnable, underline it, capitalize it, do whatever you want, put an exclamation point on it, change the font. This game is winnable. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be a real test. But you know what? I didn't think the Bears were going to beat the Rams 2 years ago when the Rams, who had scored so much, marched into town. But if the ball breaks their way, they could come out of this with a win. And I'm really curious to see what they do, because if everything was as easy as just writing down on paper, I'd have gone 6-0 in the spread last week, and I didn't, because that's how this stuff goes. And Van Halen, as much as you'd say like Nagy will mess it up, Nagy's been a lot of the reason that we've won as many games as we have. I legitimately believe that. Not just this game, not just this year, but in terms of like the last bunch of years of the Bears tenure under Matt Nagy. The Santa Slay game in LA, the only reason that I thought we got any offense at all was because Matt Nagy's play calling. The game against Washington was a fabulously called game. The game against Tampa Bay 2 years ago, another good one. The Atlanta game, making the switch for Nick Foles, I think it's one of the only reasons we won when we did. There's a lot of reasons you could point to and say Matt Nagy has won the Bears some serious games in the last couple of years of his tenure, and that there's a reason he's, 23-12 in terms of a head coaching record. But there's also reasons to doubt him. The games like this, games like Kansas City last year, games like, I'm sure you guys can remember plenty of them. The Packers game in 2019, there are plenty of games you could point to and say Matt Nagy is a real problem. And that's what I'm dying to know about the rest of the season. That the whole reason I can't wait to see what happens from here is because this is a great time for Nagy to kind of prove who he is, and I can't wait to see what happens. At this point, let's see. Jasper, that's a good point, because I think it's key. And you're right, original one. The Bears didn't run it much against the Colts, but they didn't get much at any point. And when they started passing the ball, that was the only time they technically put together some offensive yardage. But I digress, because they didn't get much. Jasper, you pointed out the Chiefs are weird, if only because they basically run whatever they want to run. And because they've got Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Tyreek Hill, they could run a triple reverse wide receiver pass back to the quarterback, and I bet it would work. But like you mentioned, Jared, all eyes are on Nagy. He doesn't have a scapegoat. I think that's good. Like, if you asked me, somebody who's been asking for us to get a baseline quarterback in so that we could evaluate, I'd put those screens that can't get blocked for directly on Matt Nagy. I'd put play calls like that 3rd and 1 Patterson call that, he even mentioned in a press conference that he really liked it. I don't know why he did, especially not against the Colts. That's on Matt Nagy. There are a lot of things about this game plan against the Colts that are on Matt Nagy, but there's just enough reason with the different plays that I've seen in this offense to suggest, there's just enough miscommunication. There's just enough poor execution for me to suggest that, you know what, maybe this offense could turn into something if you give it a little bit of time. So we've got 12 games. We've got time to I'm not going to say time to waste, but we've got time. And it's not like, in my opinion, we were going to produce more with anybody else at quarterback. So at this point, let's just let it ride and see what happens. And if the Bears are 5-11 at the end of the year, obviously you make some changes. If the Bears are 8-8, we'll talk about it. And if the Bears are 10-6, we're probably sticking with exactly who we've got. Overall, thought the defense was fine. It wasn't like the greatest performance ever, but I can tell you that from what I've seen on the notes, and the notes that I have, there was way more positive plays for this defense than there were negative plays. And the negative plays that the Bears did take were, yeah, sure, they were problems, but they weren't consistent. For instance, I could show you right here. There's this play that you probably remember where Kyle Fuller gives up, this is the pretty Sam, if you want my honest opinion at a record, I think it's to be closer to like 9-7. I'm a big believer in the cloud because I can't predict injuries. You know, if Nick Foles gets injured, we probably lose another game. If Akeem Hicks is lost, Khalil Mack, we probably lose another game. It's the whole reason that, exactly like you're saying, I'm not committing. It's because football's not going to commit to me. I don't know. I could just tell you whether I think we're going to win the next game because we don't really know what's going to happen from each game to game. But as I'm sure you can see here, I'm just rewinding and rewinding. Kyle Fuller gives up his usual Kyle Fuller cushion. T.Y. Hilton makes a nice move, and bang. It's a good play. It's a good route, but it's also pretty standard Fuller. There's plenty of the rest of, what is this? Like, I've got Jalen Johnson gets beat on one of the first plays in the game right here down the road. This is, let me find this thing. Okay, 10-16. Oh no, it's right here. It's the next one, dadgummit. I can't stand watching Jalen Johnson get beat because I love him so much, but I have to point it out. Jalen Johnson made a couple of really nice plays, and I've got like 3 in the great coverage section where Jalen just completely stones his man. But right here, I think he gets caught on a double move, which he'll get caught on occasionally, where he runs. He just gets, or I think he thought he was running an out route, and then Pascal turned it around and turned it into a lot of space. But so, yeah, right here, it's not exactly the break he wants. He's matching feet, and then Pascal turns over that left shoulder and just puts some distance between him, collects an easy one. If you ask me, like, you're really looking for an answer, who do I think is better, Jalen Johnson or Kyle Fuller? I'll always take my chances with a guy like Johnson because he can just shut people down. I mean, let me give you another play example. This is directly back the other way. This is one of the reasons that Jalen Johnson is just so good. Watch the feet matching that he does here again against Pascal. I don't even think he makes contact, but he's going to just stick with him like a mirror. And no way Rivers tries to fit it in anyways, bless his heart. But Jalen Johnson is just right there and swats the ball away with ease. He looks to me like a lockdown corner in the making. And I agree with you, Jasper. I mean, Kyle's not a bad corner. He's a good corner. I just appreciate the way that Jalen Johnson plays, especially as a press man kind of guy where, yeah, I'll go find the example that I think some people are talking about where Kyle Fuller gets destroyed and has to give up a PI call. But let's see. I kind of have to just cold spot it because it's not in my notes. I just remember it happening. You know what? I'll just put it that way. I'm sure you also remember it happening. Kyle Fuller picked up that nasty defensive pass interference because he just got smoked on a double move. There's nothing wrong. We don't have to make a fight between Kyle Fuller and Jalen Johnson because they're both good corners and they both play for the Bears, and that's a good thing. But I personally think that Jalen Johnson is a fun one to have on the team, and he might be our best corner. It doesn't really matter because the Bears, as I'm sure you guys can tell, they play sides. So in the world of like who's our CB1, we don't really have one. We play Jalen over here, we play Kyle over here, and if they want to match somebody up on somebody else, they can. I think that's problematic. I don't like doing it. I personally would rather, if I was running a defense, have like specific guys matched up with specific guys instead of letting guys like somebody like T.Y. Hilton, who is sitting over here, just make mincemeat of, actually I think that's Hilton, but anyways, having somebody like T.Y. Hilton that's as good a route runner as he is make mincemeat of Fuller down the road. But that's not the way Pagano plays defense. It's not the way Fangio played defense. It's not my call, and I would never pretend to make it my call. Jared, in terms of the lack of turnovers, I think that I can't wait to see Jalen get better, but in terms of turnovers, I don't really know. Because I think turnovers can be kind of random. I mean, I go all the way back, as silly as it sounds, to I believe 2017 when the Bears played the Washington football team when they weren't called the Washington football team. And Kirk Cousins, quarterback at the time, reared back in the pocket and threw one of the worst passes I've ever seen directly to Kyle Fuller. Fuller didn't make some crazy play. He basically caught a gift that was just a terrible, terrible ball. Just like how Deion Bush caught an interception where his guy basically fell over. And credit to him, he was in the right place at the right time. But turnovers can be kind of random. And pass deflections like this one, I'll play it again because it's fun to watch. I mean, it's just beautiful. This isn't an interception, and it doesn't need to be. It's a beautiful defensive play. 10 out of 10. Like, you don't have to break on this ball to make it good. There's another one down there, like a little later in the game. Let's see if I've got it. Yes. Way down here where Jalen's going to blanket his man again. It's awesome. But let's see. Yeah, so right here, Jalen Johnson down here is going to once again blanket Pascal. I mean, it's gorgeous. Sticks right there with him, knocks the ball away, doesn't allow anything. It's just a perfect rep, and it's not an interception. And there are going to be those, you know? Like, I'd love to go back and rescore, what is it, the one in Atlanta, the sack fumble that got taken away because of a roughing the passer call. Like, I'd love to keep that as a turnover, but it wasn't. And I think a lot of defenses are playing the Bears, or offenses, I should have said, as if they are as good as they are. And that to some degree, we ought to look at that and say, you know what? That's a good thing. I mean, let's take this example. Phillip Rivers and the Colts are about to go 3-and-out because they do that thing where they test Buster Screen. This happens once a game, I swear. You can watch for it. I point it out on my Twitter every time. Screen sticks right with him and sends the ball away. There's just nothing there. Once a game, somebody targets Screen and he blankets his guy. And I always think it's kind of funny. But like you're talking about, Holy Samurai, Kyle Fuller is a very, very good tackler at corner, and that's underrated. But I tend to agree with a friend of mine that what defensive backs need to be able to do is play the ball before it gets to the receiver. So, like, playing the receiver, matching feet, so on and so forth. That's one of the things that I think is so fun about Jalen. But getting back to the point, the Bears' defense is good. Offenses play the Bears' defense like it's good, and they tend to not risk the ball a lot, like we've seen. And sure, we could go all the way back to week 1 where it felt like everybody was scoring. But outside of week 1, the Bears have put together some really, really good defensive performances that have kept point totals fairly low. And I don't really want to count the Falcons game because the Bears were getting torn up, not only from the air, but also from the fact that we kept giving the ball back on short fields, not only through punting, but also quick turnover and an actual turnover. But I'll give it to you if you want to point out the Falcons game. But yeah, the Bears defense has been very good. It's been not much to get upset about, in my opinion, to say the least. And Blazing Raptor, I've seen what you're talking about where Jets fans will call him terrible. I still remember watching his tape and totally disagreeing. I was like, I don't know. I see this guy. And I need to show, or I'll show you guys what he's bad at if you want to see it, because it's in the first quarter. If there's one thing you want to do against Buster Screen, it's change direction. And it is, it's right here. So yeah, the Bears had no business winning that Falcons game. It was fun that we got one at all. But so you're going to see Screen right here. And if you want to beat him, you pretty much need a route that's going to make him fully change direction because he doesn't do it quickly. I'll back this up just so you can see it again. He's not a great start stopper. So if you make him go from backwards to forwards, forwards to backwards, left to right, right to left, any full 180-degree change of direction, Screen struggles. And the Colts were able to pick it for a quick gain of 11 there. Let me go see if I can't find. If y'all find it first, just let me know and we can take a look at it. But yeah, the one where Fuller gets destroyed for that defensive pass interference is a nasty one. And it's primarily nasty because it's a very good route and you don't like seeing those. But it sometimes, again, you give credit where the credit is due. Here's 2 plays that we might as well cover because they look like losses of yards, and losses of yards are great. It looks like Nichols makes a play here. Let's find the play itself. Here is Nichols. Where is he? Looks like he might be. There he is. So he comes around on a stunt. Nichols, again, hit a really solid game. Happy with him. Right here, he picks up a stunt from Akeem Hicks and roars around. I'll tell you somebody that we haven't talked about yet. Roquan Smith played a really good football game. I mean, he was all over the field. He was pretty much the only linebacker that actually played the game for the overwhelming majority of it. And thank you, Davon. Any tip helps. But here's Roquan. He's going to jet to that sideline. And, of course, my notification popped up and probably showed, like, what, or probably disguised it. But there's Roquan. He's going to jet to the sideline, beat that running back to the edge, push him out of bounds. Ooh, that is some fun stuff to watch. You combine this with that, like, massive bang, like, screen hit that Roquan had earlier in the game. He's really starting to look like that fast will linebacker that we picked him to be up at number 8 overall. And you can dispute it, but like in terms of the call or the pick, but either way, he's been undoubtedly good, and that's been really, really awesome to see. Let's take a peek through. Oh boy, here it is. So I got to point out, somebody asked for this. I'm not just masochistic, but here's Kyle Fuller, and here's the play that he gets shredded on, and he does that thing that you see in the NHL all the time, or the NBA, where he knows he's beat, and he just interferes because why not? Hilton's going to run a stop-and-go route, and it is really, really beautiful. I mean, I'll slow it down for you, and you guys can see this. So right here, Fuller is matching feet as much as he can, waiting for Hilton to come back. Hilton's going to stop right there, and it freezes Fuller, and he just roars past him. I mean, hey, there's a reason T.Y. Hilton's one of the best deep threats in football, and this is a great example of why. That route is gorgeous. But there's not a ton Kyle could do. In theory, maybe he's like just, quote-unquote, just better. But with his style of play, that's where you're going to get it. That's where you're going to get him, and the Colts pick on him for what easily could have been a touchdown. You don't know, but you're almost okay with him taking the foul. I'm not 100% certain he would have gotten to the ball, but I can't take away that, like, he might have, and you don't want to give up 6 immediately. So somebody mentioned Eddie Jackson potentially not rolling over to help enough. A good throw will give a single high safety almost no chance of getting there. Jackson, in this case, is already gone. He's already left his spot, and he's multiple steps in that direction as Phillip Rivers is releasing this ball. So he anticipated it plenty clean, but he just didn't get there because it's basically impossible from that single high spot. Biscuit, I know it looked like he accidentally stepped on him, but it really looked to me like he just blatantly interfered and just said, okay, well, that's me. Let's take a look here. Yeah, I think he just interfered, but heck, I don't know. And yeah, Michael, ref ball is a real thing for sure. It's something that I know football wants to avoid becoming, and so they're trying to figure out how to like swallow the work. But I don't know. It's complicated to talk about referees because I think it's way easier to say, the refs lost it for us than to say you need to be good enough to play through the refs and win around them. But at the same time, I mean, there's only so much you can do. And eventually the referee is probably going to end up costing each team something big, which is a huge bummer. You almost wish that they could take the refs out of the game, but then, I mean, I don't know what he'd do at that point. One guy that I do think he's getting a lot of blame for doing nothing when, at least from what I'm seeing, there is a lot to like about what Robert Quinn is doing. When he does get the chance to rush the passer, like you'll see right here, he's very quick around the edge. He does exactly what I showed in that like big video I did on him. Rips around, forces a quick throw, and Roquan gets him out of bounds for a gain of only 3 yards on a 1st and goal. But so Robert Quinn. A friend of mine thinks he's not healthy. I don't know what to tell you. That would be total speculation, so I don't know. But he definitely doesn't get on the field as often as you'd like. When he is on the field, he's effective. He gets chipped an awful lot. He is pretty much consistently being double-teamed in some capacity, and as you saw right there, the one time he wasn't, he got right around the edge and almost forced a almost forced a fumble or a sack or whatever it might have been. You don't really know. But there's everything to like about Quinn except for his contract. So given that this is his cheap year and the years coming forward are when he gets truly expensive as he gets older, we'll have to see what happens. Any final questions before we button this thing up and call it a night? Oh, Davon, I'll tell you right now, I think that Robert Quinn is a one-trick pony, but being a one-trick pony isn't a problem if it's good. There are plenty of guys, like true vertical threats in the NFL, that have made a living getting all the way, or like just doing one thing, like Ted Ginn, who's basically just a vertical threat and has been for the last, 13 years. And if you're really good at it, good for you. I mean, there's a career for you in the NFL, especially at a position like pass rusher where you rush the passer. And if your one move is too good to stop, it's too good. But yeah, final thoughts. I think this Buccaneers game is going to be a test. I think that to call it a test is almost to be unfair, because it's, when you look at this on paper, the matchup doesn't favor the Bears at all. But there's something to being a home team on Thursday night, especially a home team without any travel, because we were just here, against the Colts, that gives the Bears an advantage, very similar to the way that Denver tends not to lose in the first 2 weeks of their season when they play at home. So this is a weird one because the Buccaneers are probably a much better team than the Bears in terms of what we saw against Indianapolis. But the outside factors that the teams can't control are they favor the Bears a lot. So I'm really curious to see what happens tomorrow. And frankly, if there's anything I'm excited about, it's getting to move on from this game. Because as much as there is for us to learn, and as much as there were good plays, as much as the Bears did push the ball downfield, and there were opportunities there for the taking, some we converted on, some that we didn't, this isn't a really good game. This isn't fun. It's not fun watching your team score 6 points. It's not fun not having an end zone highlight. It's not fun when your team can't score, and the Bears weren't able to. They got an acrobatic catch out of Darnell Mooney. They got a play action throw from Nick Foles, like the one that they tried. Somebody asked earlier, like, what do they think about why Nagy's play calling is so random? And I think it's because Nagy's the kind of guy that has so many ideas and is trying to figure out how to become a play caller, because he's still fairly young in terms of how coaches work and how they grow as play callers individually, that he's trying like almost semi-random things. But what I have noticed, I'm sure you guys have seen the same, when Matt Nagy is at his best, his play calling is almost second to none. He can sequence plays, like, again, can being the operative word, that are just phenomenal and make the opposing defense look like they don't exist, or that they're just being read like Nagy's in their head. The trouble is that when Nagy's out of rhythm, everything looks incredibly disjointed. And the number one thing that I'm going to tell you that I have a problem with is that there are too many plays in the playbook. Like this one right here, this screen, this should be 4 yards. This should be 4 or 5 yards. This is honestly like this is what I think about this offense overall, that if Ted Ginn or whoever they have out there makes a half decent block, at least Miller's able to pick up maybe 4 yards. You'll see right here, pre-snap motion, he's going to run out there. Say Ginn's able to seal that, and Robinson maybe only gets kind of a decent block, but Miller runs up and steps out of bounds right there. That's 6 yards. That's great. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But the execution on these screens has always been bad, and it's no fun. And it's not good for an offense, and it doesn't make anything healthy, because it basically turns our offense into Madden, where if we can't run the ball and we can't generate yardage out of screens, that means the only way that we can generate yardage is out of little quick passing plays that get us 5 to 6 yards and deep shots. It's just like playing Madden, where you say, this one will get me 13, this one will get me 16, this one will get me 5, and I threw an interception. And it's 3rd down and 4th down. And so when it comes to like what I want to see out of Matt Nagy, I just want to see cohesive execution. I don't care whether I really don't care whether we run West Coast or under center as long as it's good. I'm a big fan of West Coast offense. I watch what I watch what Doug Peterson's done in Philadelphia this year notwithstanding, and Andy Reid and plenty of others, and that offense is super fun to watch. But this offense has an issue where it just won't execute sometimes, and that to me does fall on the head coach. It sure can't fall on Bill Lazor and John DeFilippo because they've only been here for a year, and these same problems existed last year. Past a certain point, not to be some meat-headed guy, it has to fall on the head coach. And if the Bears offense can't pick things up and become respectable, I think that eventually Matt Nagy just has to get the blame. I'll tell you guys this, though. Again, in a world of like being positive and also telling you what I think, I don't think the Bears were an 8-8 team last year. I think they were probably a 6-10 team. I think that Matt Nagy was able to pull out 2 to 3 wins that the Bears shouldn't have gotten, and was able to help drag the team to 8-8. And I was amazed that as Trubisky played as poorly as he did, as the bottom really fell out of that Bears team, as people like Akeem Hicks got hurt, that he was able to hold the locker room together. And even at the end of the season against the Vikings backups, say what you will, say what you will about Matt Nagy, the locker room kept fighting, and they did end the season at 8-8, despite getting completely embarrassed by both the Packers and the Chiefs in back-to-back weeks. We'll see. I really can't make it clear enough. I am a fan of Nagy, as I am, but the jury's out. I'm willing to come right back around on him and criticize him for plenty of things. I thought this game plan was bad. I did not like the fact that the Bears came out as poor. Like, I understand what they were trying to do. I'll tell you this outright. The idea was that plays like this, for crying out loud, that you're seeing with this, or where Foles misunderstands and doesn't execute it correctly and nobody's on the same page, that they were in the middle of installing a semi-new offense with a new quarterback that needs to run things differently. So I get him wanting to try to lean on his offensive line, but I'll tell you right now, this was probably the wrong game to do that against the Colts, because the offensive line did not win it. And I'm talking, he had to lean on them in passing action, he had to lean on them in running action, and really not a whole lot worked. So, as it stands, I didn't like this game plan. I'll tell you up front, I think this is one of the worst game plans Matt Nagy's had in 3 years. But he tends to respond well. And if not this week, I'll kill him after if we lose to Carolina. But I don't think it'll come to that. I think we'll be able to win 1, if not 2 of the next 2 games. But I'm also a big fan of the Bears, and I understand where my bias comes from. Again, to just repeat it one last time, we're getting 43-year-old Tom Brady off of 4 days rest. This is like taking on a great pitcher that's old on 3 days rest in the playoffs. You like your chances. It's the best that you can get. The Saints last year was awful, but honestly, Alexander, I really did think that the game plan was okay there and that the team's performance was just terrible. In this one, I can take a look at a lot of the performance and I can point back to the execution and say, yeah, sure, the execution was bad, but what in the world are we doing trying to attack the Colts this way? I mean, just to give you a reminder, we attacked the team with DeForest Buckner at DeForest Buckner instead of attacking any of the edges, because that's just what we did. And there's a point where I look and I say, I don't really care how, I don't really care how well or how poorly Montgomery does at getting outside. You got to figure out another way to get that ball at the edge of the defense, or else they're going to eat you alive. So in terms of what happens with play calling, my hope, I'll tell you guys this, is that Nagy can learn to be a better play caller over time. I do think it's going to sound ironic because I'm saying that, Mitch Trubisky only had 3 years to prove himself and get out, but Matt Nagy may need more. But Sean Payton and other offensive geniuses not named Sean McVay weren't built in a day. They needed some time. And I'm not saying that Matt Nagy should get a 5-year leash. I'm saying that let's wait and see what he's got at the end of this year. And if it's not dramatically better, then we can throw him out together. But I have an inkling he may surprise us. Certainly, he's surprised us between 2018 and 2019 in a lot of positive ways. So I'm more than willing to give Matt Nagy a chance to surprise us here in this weird game, or this weird season. Somebody mentioned it. A lot of people are kind of advocating, like, when you look for that tough-nosed, offensive-focused, like, let's go back to traditional, run under center, run shotgun off, or like run outside zone, hit him in the mouth, toughness stuff. You are kind of talking about John Fox. Like, John Fox is the old school coach. Matt Nagy is the typified new school coach, for better or for worse. And between guys like him, Matt LaFleur, and Sean McVay, we're still evaluating which ones are good and which ones are bad. So let's see how it goes. I mean, I think that there has been a lot to like. I love the idea of the Chicago Bears being an offensive-focused team, and maybe more importantly, if Matt Nagy develops into a consistently good play caller, say Sean McVay, then you don't have to worry about your offensive coordinator getting replaced every year, because that's the biggest frustration that I had back with any of our defensive coaches, was that as soon as, anything happened in terms of offensive success, bang, they got hired away. And of course, I always laugh because that was Adam Gase that was providing for us back in, 2016? But you want to be able to have a head coach that's offensive focused and they can therefore provide a consistent play calling mindset and offensive approach for years to come, because he's the head coach. He's not going anywhere. That's, at this point, we're just talking. I don't have any problem with that. I think the best case scenario for the Bears, like, again, if you made me pick right now, right, between the Bears getting a dynamite quarterback out of Mitchell Trubisky and a dynamite coach out of Matt Nagy, based on what I've seen out of Bill Belichick and the Saints and Sean Payton, I think we can find a quarterback that could work with a good offensive coach in lieu of having to wait for it. If we had that great, I think we can wait for a great quarterback while we use a great coach. I think if you have a great quarterback and a bad coach, then we've seen what happens in Deshaun Watson's Texans. You still have issues. So at this point, silly as it sounds, in the world of like potential and where it's at, I'm cheering for Matt Nagy. I've liked a lot of what I've seen from him. A lot of his creativity is really great when it's executed well, but a lot of it hasn't been executed well over the last year and a half. And if he's the guy that we hope he is, right? Because we're all Bears fans. We all want him to play well and to coach well, to lead this team in a good direction. Then he should respond, because nobody should know that the team is underperforming better than nobody should know it better than Nagy himself. Sam, in that case, that's a good question. Why could Nagy develop somebody better if not Mitch? The answer would tend to be that maybe Mitch just didn't have it between the ears, just to pick an example. It's tough to teach somebody who can't learn, for lack of a better term. And Mitch definitely seemed to struggle with his reads. And if he had an issue if he had an issue with reading the field, it wouldn't surprise me if he had an issue taking other coaching points at the same time. This could sound so silly, but ever since I started asking questions about, Mitch Trubisky, I started listening to more coaches talk in their press conferences, and I started listening to the way that they spoke. And I'll tell you what, just to pick some examples, Nick Foles, Derek Carr, Gardner Minshew, Aaron Rodgers, you ask them about a throw and they'll tell you exactly what they were thinking. They'll tell you, I was looking at it and I was trying to lead the guy. I missed it. I didn't get him there. Or, I thought I could squeeze it between three guys of coverage. And, I guess I managed to, and I'm glad. Devontae made a great play. And you look at a whole lot of that stuff, and I get the impression that Mitch, who speaks more in cliches and says, I just missed it. Or, hey, Anthony made a really good play on that one. That maybe there's something lacking there. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or somebody that's going to be able to look inside somebody's brain and tell you who they are. But I'll tell you that Mitch Trubisky I believe he was in the North Carolina system for 5 years. So he got to sit and learn one college offense and take over it in his final season. And he looked really good. He had me mystified. I thought he was awesome. Like, I thought Mitch Trubisky was going to be it. I made my entire start as a Bears fan talking about how Mitch Trubisky was growing. But in 2019, that critical third year, I didn't see enough of a jump forward, and I'm really hopeful that that's just, generally that tends to mean that a quarterback's not very good, but I'm hoping that it's just a matter of the wrong player and not a matter of the wrong coaching staff, because certainly Dave Ragone is sticking around, and John DeFilippo is one of the best in the business. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you could look at and say, like, if not Nagy and this coaching staff, who could develop a quarterback, because John DeFilippo's work with Carson Wentz and Gardner Minshew can't be understated. Matt Nagy's work with, sure, it's Patrick Mahomes, but he also worked with Alex Smith and helped him become who he is. There are a lot of guys on these resumes of these coaches that have played good football under guys like Bill Lazor with Andy Dalton, played some of the more efficient football of his life. There's reasons to hope that this coaching staff actually has some moxie when it comes to developing a quarterback, and that maybe we're just looking at too small a sample size with Trubisky, but we don't really know. So we need to like see what happens from here, because, and this is the great and beautiful mystery of football, we just don't know till we see more plays, right? And one of these days we'll look back and we will remember exactly what happened, and we'll look at it with new eyes. Maybe you guys out here, like, let me see, what is this? Yeah, I know, Rich. At that time, I really had looked around 2018 season and thought that I'd seen a ton of potential growing steps for Trubisky. So when I saw the same growing pains with Josh Allen, I thought for sure he was going to fall off the wagon, and look at him now. It's trouble. And Sam, I totally get what you mean. Like, you look at Watson's struggles, and it does make it look like Mitch didn't get enough help at the skill positions. But I look at a lot of what he did. I could walk you through almost any play in this game, and Elijah already did. We're at the very tail end of a live stream and just having a good time talking. But what I've seen in terms of like the, oh gracious, let me find my train of thought again. Oh, okay. What I remember seeing in terms of what Foles did is that I'll back him up on any play that he made in this game, in terms of, like, I can tell you what he was thinking. It's very evident who Foles was reading, what he was looking for, and how he was trying to distribute the ball. And in a lot of situations, he deliberately took a more aggressive option. Like that second quarter one that I showed with Darnell Mooney. He took the shot downfield in particular, instead of taking an easier option that was opening up later to Anthony Miller, partially because he was getting pressured, but partially because he wanted to just push the ball downfield. Nagy and Foles are on the same page. They want to push this ball, like, as far down the field as they can. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I mean, again, this season is a real opportunity to show something. And these first two games against the Colts and the Buccaneers, I got to be honest, these aren't exactly the kinds of games that anybody wants to put in their trophy case. Nick Foles and the Eagles did not look very good against the 2018 defense, which shouldn't be surprising. But what is it? Which shouldn't be surprising because that defense is good. In the same capacity, the Colts defense is great. Currently, they're sitting at number 1 in DVOA, and I don't think they'll end there. I think this Colts defense is really good, but are they the best in the league? I'm not sure. They've played the Vikings, the Jets, us, and another bad team. Oh, the Jags, but they got beat by the Jags. So, in terms of who they've played, it's nobody special, but even so, they shut us down, like, really, really badly. The Buccaneers, they have allowed some serious points, but they've played really good defense. Again, neither of these games are like your offensive banner games if they go poorly. But maybe after that, we start to see the ball roll a little bit. The Rams aren't the greatest defense in the world. The Saints don't have the greatest defense in the world. And maybe the Bears could move the ball. Again, if you just get it moving, who knows what happens, because Nagy's such a rhythm caller. But we'll see. I mean, It all depends on how things like tomorrow night work out. It all depends on who's healthy. It all depends on what these guys are even trying to install. Because you look at a play like this, I'll back this one up. The Colts sillied the Bears so hard on this play. I'm convinced, as I've been watching this, that the Colts just dedicated these 4 guys, not the linebackers, like this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy, to stopping this action. And then when they saw Cole Kmet come over right here, he is going to give away a play that I don't think he was supposed to. So the Bears call this running action, and the linebackers don't take the bait for a second. In theory, they're supposed to be looking at Cordero Patterson. They aren't. They're looking at Darnell Mooney, and the whole way, and boy, do they swallow him for a loss of 3. And I agree with you, Blaine. I mean, there's so many ways that you could potentially make this work, but the Bears don't, and there are a lot of reasons for it. I hope that their offense improves. I think that there's actual reason to think that it could get better than 3 points, but they're definitely going to have to go back to the drawing board a little bit and kind of, what is the word, do some soul searching. As cliche as it sounds, it's a real thing where teams will go back, they'll take a hard look in the mirror, and they'll figure out what went wrong and how to fix it. But yeah, as we close up, just for you, Elijah, I'm thinking, just by the way, about your tackle comment, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears take a tackle in this next draft, like first round, because whether right tackle or left tackle, they do need some developmental players at that position. But let's see. Yeah. In terms of like defensive progression, Roquan is developing very, very nicely, both in coverage and on the ground. And there's a lot to like about what the defense is doing. I don't know if I could say silly things like the turnovers will come. I really don't know. I'd love to tell you that I know one way or another, but the Bears need to play a little more aggressive if they're going to take the ball away. And for that to happen, they need to find a way to get leads. So if they can get those leads, like by the offense playing well and the defense getting a stop early, I won't be surprised if the defense starts to look a little bit more like the ruthless, aggressive 2018 and early 2019 defenses that we've seen last year. But until then, we're going to see this same, not quite Tampa 2, but kind of Tampa 2, bend, but don't break, don't give up a huge play down the field sort of like play that, and sort of defense that we've seen over the last 4 games at minimum, that it isn't working. And yeah, it is kind of Lovey light. That's really a pretty good way to put it. It's like Lovey, but with, it's funny. I was going to say more talent, but it's not, is it? Like those Lovey defenses were really, really good. But yeah, a lot of this comes back to like how this Buccaneers game is going to go. It sounds so silly. Let me know if you guys can still see this. Let's take I always like looking at the schedule at the very, very end, because I mean every single win and loss shapes everything this season. So let's take a look at that. It's always funny how the NFL changes, because for instance, when we first started this season, and let me know if y'all can see this. If not, that would be a bummer. Yeah, it looks like y'all can. So when we originally started the season, I had a game like the Texans penciled in as a really tough game. But now that one looks winnable. That one looks surprisingly tough. These Green Bay games look hard, guys. They look tough. And when you look at the rest of the schedule, there's a whole lot of question marks. I mean, what are the Titans going to look like? We've got them on our schedule. I have no idea what they're going to do because of all the COVID sorts of things. Can we beat the Vikings and the Lions and then the Vikings again? Oh, there again. Oh, there they are on the schedule. Maybe. I don't know. And I'm unfortunately with you, Yogi. I almost don't want to watch us play the Green Bay Packers. But, I mean, it's complicated. Because if the Bears beat the Buccaneers, we are a staunch 4-1 going into a Panthers game that would be tough because they're at home, and Rule's team is actually playing pretty good ball. But if we win that, we're 5-1. Now, if we lose both of these, if we're 3-3, I think the season's on the ropes immediately. Like, this one is a really big deal. And good question, Joe, in terms of why we don't move, or why we move away from like zone and move to power. We've tried power, like we see it. Most of Patterson's runs come out of power, by the way. And yeah, Sam, I've seen the same thing. I basically have scheduled everything around noon because the Bears are playing at noon all the time. But the Bears will move to power here and there. It just doesn't work that well. They'd rather play zone because zone's a little more adaptable. It all ties back into the freedom aspect of offense, because Nagy's trying to be creative with creative freedom in almost every aspect of his offense. But so in terms of like what we're doing here, this game is a big question mark. Go ahead and mark tomorrow night down as a maybe. It's winnable. I said that before. I said that like an hour ago, but it's more than likely a loss because the Buccaneers are very, very good, and they've got a great defense. And as we saw, our offensive line struggles against defensive lines that are just flat out better than them. So hope to goodness that they have some kind of weird jet lag situation. They come out flat, because that's what the Bears can hope for. If they lose this game, they need the Panthers game, because I think at this point in the season, as they go into the rest of their schedule, they need to be 4-2. Like, whether they're shooting for 9-7 and the 7th seed, or whether they're shooting for 10-6, they have got to be they've got to be 4-2, because this Rams game, toss up. The Saints game, probably losing. Titans game, again, whether it's a forfeit or a win or loss, I have no idea, but we have to get there when we get there. Vikings, that should be winnable. Packers, they look like the class of the NFC. I hate saying it, but they do. As long as Aaron Rodgers stays on this crazy MVP-like level that he's at, they look unbeatable. So hopefully something changes there, even though I got to tell you, I really like watching Aaron Rodgers play football. But, don't tell anybody I said that. So then the Lions are winnable. The Texans are very beatable. I mean, there's real potential for this to be one of the easier games on the schedule. Kind of funny to say. Vikings, again, beatable. Jaguars, who knows? They definitely look bad. And I've been pretty high on what is this? The Minshew, but I do think that you don't need to unsubscribe, Davon. But anyways, yeah, the point is that this Bears season could go a lot of ways. Are you guys really going to tell me that you don't think that the Bears have a shot against the Rams? Their offense can score like crazy, but we've messed up Jared Goff every single year. And so it wouldn't surprise me if the Bears might just be able to pull something out. But yeah, the point, all of this to say, is that this Bears schedule all starts with these next 2 weeks. It all started before this, frankly, with the first bunch of weeks. But credit to the Bears. I mean, I got to tell you, there was a point where I was looking at the schedule like early on. I knew we needed to win these 2. We did. I thought we were going to lose the Falcons, and then I thought we were going to beat the Colts. Well, we didn't. We switched them. We switched these 2. Won Falcons, lost to the Colts. Honestly, fine. This is a good place to be. 3-1. We do like this. And yeah, Davon, that's a funny thought that I hadn't put together, is that Leonard Floyd would have his shot at a revenge game against the Bears in Los Angeles. But hey, we'll see. I mean, Ian, I can't tell because of the I and the L, but assuming that you're Ian, but so yeah, I know, right? Assuming that you're talking about Pagano, I think Pagano's been fine. Okay, Elon, thank you. But I think Pagano's been fine, like that, lowercase, like just leave it at fine. I think it's easy to criticize defensive coordinators in Chicago, but I also think that this defense has been one of the best in the NFL. It's funny to be criticizing a defense for not being too good, like for basically saying they're just good and that's just okay. But I think that he's been in a precarious defensive position where his goal is to not give up any points and any yards because he's not sure what his offense can score. And I think that Pagano has always played best in a system where he's loose with what his defense is and isn't calling. And what I would say is that if I had to guess, right, I look back at 2019 and go ahead and take a mental walk with me, y'all. Remember week 1? Where Aaron Rodgers only was able to score 10 points with a decent Packers team that the Bears and Leonard Floyd in particular, along with Roy Robertson Harris, had him slamming the football into the ground by the end of the game because they were just playing too well. That was a Pagano defense. Then they went to Denver, and the defense basically won the game for the offense. Yeah, I know, right? Then they played Washington, and the defense won the game for the offense. The offense put a lot of points on the board, don't get me wrong, but it all started when Case Keenum had 3 turnovers and a pick 6 by the defense. And then the piece de resistance, the Bears played the Vikings at home and tore apart a good Vikings team. To remind me the score, because I'm pretty sure we held Cousins to 6 points, but it may have even just been 3. This Bears defense, under Chuck Pagano, can attack. They know how to play ball. Then, after that, the whole defense kind of just evaporated. It just dried up. And I don't think it's because it didn't go anywhere. I don't think it's because we ran out of pixie dust or something like that. I think it's because Chuck Pagano realized that he needed to play a little more conservative, or else really good teams with better offenses were going to put major distance between our offense and their offense. That basically he had to try to change from we're going to attack you, we're going to dominate you, to we have to limit the damage that you can cause. And it ended up creating the defense that we see today. I think, Joe, the turnover thing, like the Bears 2018 defense, I'm going to use some words that a lot of Bears fans are going to hate. Kind of think they got lucky. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that they got leads. Getting leads for a defense, it's such an underrated thing. In 2019, they didn't have any leads. In 2020, they haven't really had a whole lot of leads. In 2018, they had leads all the time. And because they had leads, other teams were throwing it. Because they were throwing it, we picked the ball off. We forced fumbles. We created all these like memorable Kirk Cousins moments where he got sacked and dropped the ball and everybody jumped on him. And it's tough because the Bears in 2020, if they can generate those leads, I think they can get back to that. Maybe not all the way to 2018. It's incredible. But, I'm almost sure he did. But if they can, I mean, I'm talking like this or tomorrow night, Thursday night, if the Bears go down on offense and they score a touchdown to open the game, you watch how the defense changes. I'm not sure they will, which is a huge bummer. It's funny you say that, Davon. The Bear, 2018. Thank you, because you said 2020, and I was about to dispute that like crazy. But so they did get lucky, and they were better. Going back to this, if the Bears get an opening touchdown against the Buccaneers, just you watch how the defensive complexion changes. It's the GOAT, so he may get the better of them. But it wouldn't shock me if the Bears are able to generate a lead that they'll pin their ears back and they'll go at Brady and they'll test him for all he's worth. And that Tampa Bay line is incredible. I mean, it's really, really good. But like you're saying, Joe, you talk about how Tom Brady's going to torch the middle. I could ask, like, with who? And I could have a point because they're very strapped for players. But the Bears have started playing that dime package where Roquan Smith sits in the middle and he's the only one there. And he's been playing it pretty well. Phillip Rivers didn't get a ton of yards out of the middle of the field outside of that blatant offensive pass interference that we talked about. And Green Bay is a very good team. You almost want to throw them out because Elon, I personally think that it's 2 games. That what we need to see is something out of either the Buccaneers game or the Carolina game. The Buccaneers game is a tougher game, but at least you get the Thursday night home field thing. And yeah, I did, Davon. Tom Brady is amazing. I mean, you don't have to convince me on that. I'm not about to be some Brady's just a system quarterback kind of guy. He's the GOAT for a reason. But between the Tampa Bay game, where they've got the more common advantages, like being at home on a Thursday night against a tougher team, and the more uncommon game, where They have to go into Carolina, not necessarily easy, play an away game against a team where they need to get a win. One of those games, they've got to come away with a win, and if they don't, this season's gonna get out of control, like really out of control. I think that the Buccaneers are a little more vulnerable in the secondary than meets the eye, but their linebacking core is good. I mean, their whole front seven basically might just be the best in football. And with that in mind, it's not great news, but it's what the Bears have to live with. And the only comfort that I have, Mitch Trubisky, not great under pressure. Let's call it like it is. But Nick Foles, he went up against, Nick Foles went up against that 2018 defense that we think is so legendary, and I think we think so correctly. It was an incredible defense, and he faced the best front seven in the league, and he scored 17 points in a grind fest, which, granted, that's nothing huge, but I'd be lying if I said that against that 2018 defense, I thought that those points just felt monumental. And the fact that Nick Foles was able to drive down at the very, very end of the season and basically crush the Bears' hopes in 2018 with that 4th and goal touchdown at the very, very end, that was tough. And it was hard to watch. And he was able to make really nice plays when they mattered against a front that was incredibly good. And you're totally right, Van Halen. He had an incredibly good offensive line. I mean, I'm not trying to dispute any of this. It's not like I think Foles... I think you guys have gotten this picture, right? I don't think Foles is an MVP in waiting. I think that he's a limited quarterback that can do his job, and that he allows us to see the rest of what this offense has to offer. And if the offensive line is able to step up to the challenge tomorrow night, we may just have a game on our hands, which is great. But if they can't, and if the receivers can't make contested catches when they need to, if the tight ends can't shake loose over the middle of the field, the Bears could be in for a long night. And if they are, you know what? We'll look back and we'll say they played the number 1 and the number 2 defenses, and we got an ice bath and a nice reminder that we are not as good on offense as we want to be. But you know what? Maybe. I mean, it's like they always say, right? There's a reason we play the game. And a lot of smart people can come out and predict it, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going into the game tomorrow. Still excited that the Bears have a game on Thursday, and I don't have to wait all the way till Sunday. And from there, we'll see what happens. I mean, again, I don't know. I mean, this Bears team is all over the place. This offense is impossible to judge, the one that we saw against the Colts, because it doesn't look finished. It really is like looking at, to me, when I look back at this game plan, when I look back at what they tried to do, it's somewhere between absolutely crazy, what in the world were you thinking, Matt Nagy, and we didn't get the whole offense installed, and that's too bad. But what I want to see, not just against the Buccaneers, but mostly against Carolina, look, I'm not crazy. We're not going to go back to what we did in Atlanta and hang 5 touchdowns and a half on everybody, but I do want to see the Bears offense start to move the ball. I do want to see them attack coverages and scout effectively. I want to see this offense get better. And we've got 12 games left in the season to see that. And I can't wait because it should be fun. This is a better year than 2019. Let's put it that way. And the Bears have to they'll have some tough decisions to make at the end of the season, but we'll get there when we get there. For now, we've got a game against the Buccaneers tomorrow, and I can't wait to see what happens. I hope you guys do too. If you like what I have to say, feel free to follow me over on Twitter. That's where you get a lot of little analysis, not just with what I can see during the game, but what I can see afterwards, especially on Twitter and when the All 22 gets dropped. This is going to be real weird in terms of the way that the schedule works, because even though it's a Thursday game, they still don't release the All 22 until next Tuesday, which is a huge bummer. I'm going to cut out part of this stream, the first, 54 minutes, maybe about 50. Feel free, if you want to support me, to show that to other people. I hate asking for it, but I really want to push this channel. I love doing this stuff. And if there's some way that I can create a path to doing this full time, I would love to do it. And it's all with y'all's help that I can make that happen. And I'll be doing these streams, every night or every Wednesday night starting at 9, because they're way easier to do than the 15-minute videos until we get to the off season. And then it's back to the really cool videos that I like putting together. I'll tell you guys this because I thought it was funny. it is sort of interesting thinking about the videos I was planning to make, because I had one on Cohen that I was cooking up for a really long time and how good he is, and here we are. Cohen's torn his ACL, so I'm kind of glad I didn't make it. It would have been a giant bummer, but oh well. I'm excited to see what happens. I've said it. You guys have heard it. But from here on out, it is in y'all's hands. Thank you guys so much for the support. Thanks for coming to the stream. It's always a great time hanging out with y'all and talking about what I can see during the game and going through this like at that like nailed down level. But yeah, I will see you guys, or I'll put up, 6 picks, probably on Friday at some point. Probably gonna take out the video package just so it's a little faster, and we definitely got off to a rough start. But if you're into betting, that's something that I've thought is kind of fun and interesting to do. But yeah, okay, Davon, just for you, squeeze that last question in, and then we'll sign off. What you got? I didn't actually get the chance to see it. I heard a ton about it. But basically what I heard was a whole lot of like, he needs to do this, he needs to do that, but there were growing points. And at this point in his 4th year, I do think that there's a lot to be, or I think that there's a lot that's been said about Mitch, but right now we really ought to just focus what we've got on the team that it's at hand, because, you know, it's important. Or not it's important, but it's where we're going to see the most potential understanding of who Nagy is, what this offense is, and whether it's got legs. That's the key here. Nagy's got to prove the concept of his offense here in his 3rd year, and I can't wait. But yeah, guys, it's been awesome. This is me signing off. I can't wait until tomorrow night's game, and we'll talk about it then. Till next time, guys, bear down, and thanks so much for bearing with me.